I always wonder what's going to be the first one where we just make everybody angry or it splits the fan base in half.
Honestly, it might be this one.
You think it might be this one?
This might be our Last Jedi.
Yeah.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2022, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal Studios' failed cinematic universe of monster movies, one pitch at a time. We are currently deep into Phase 2 of the DU, and today, I, Dalton DeShane, will be pitching the 11th film in the franchise, The Bride of Frankenstein. And sitting across from me, as always,
Hi, I'm Dylan Roth.
the other host, who
Yes.
is not pitching a movie today.
No, I'm not. Today, I get to sit back and listen to Dalton's pitch and perform characters as we go through the abbreviated script that they've created for this film, which is, I
Not
guess,
that abbreviated.
not that abbreviated. We're looking at a pretty full length screenplay here.
Not quite, but it's about as long as Black Lagoon was.
Right on.
Dylan sort of got the day off today because he delivered an excellent Phantom of the Opera pitch a month ago that was a full-blown musical. I will not be one-upping him today.
No, you're going to save that for Phase 3.
I have a normal pitch. Before we get too deep into it and start talking about The Bride of Frankenstein, I did want to offer a little catch-up for those of you who are new listeners. This is the third sequel, straight sequel that we've had in the Dark Universe after The Mummy Returns and Werewolves of London. And it's been a while since the Frankenstein episode. It was our second episode of the podcast.
Yeah, actually, the very first original story that we did here
Yes.
was episode 2. Right after we recapped The Mummy, you kicked off our take on the Dark Universe, our era with your Frankenstein.
Yes. So if you would like to hear that story in its entirety, pause this episode now, go back to episode 2. Otherwise, here's a quick recap, but beware there are spoilers for past episodes. And if you already know this stuff because you just re-listened to Frankenstein because you knew this was coming and you wanted to be a good little listener, you can skip forward a little bit. But here's our take on Frankenstein. Our version of Frankenstein's monster was created in the late 1820s by Caroline Clerval, daughter of Victor Frankenstein. Victor was a world-renowned scientist and threw young Caroline out of the house when she tried to follow in his footsteps. Some years later, Victor died of scarlet fever alongside his wife, Elizabeth. Caroline returned to Castle Frankenstein and decided to get revenge on her father by resuming her experiments with the goal of reanimating his dead body and proving to him her worth as a scientist. However, when Victor woke up, he had none of his memories and saw Caroline as his mother. Caroline was disgusted by the oozing, scarred monstrosity he had become and abandoned him. Years later, Victor ran into Caroline again and learned the secret of his origin, that he was, in fact, her father, Victor Frankenstein, and had once had a bride. He demanded Caroline resurrect her dead mother so he could be reunited with his mate. And when lightning struck his bride, Victor got a shock as well, and it restored his memories of his previous life. But then Caroline botched the reanimation on purpose, and Victor tried to kill her before becoming overwhelmed by memories of Caroline as his daughter. And he relented. He then retreated to the North Pole, where he expected to live in solitude forever, but in the present day, he was found by an agent of Dracula and lured into his cause by the promise that Drac could resurrect Elizabeth once more. He went back to his murderous ways until Gwen Conliffe, one of our werewolves, convinced him to seek community with the Dark Legion, our team of monster heroes. When the Dark Legion disbanded at the end of that film, Victor went his own way, and we haven't seen him since.
Well done.
Yes, I wrote that ahead of time.
I feel like that recap also has some flavor and some clarification and stuff from the recent rewrites you've been doing and developing that script.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I honestly lose track of what was actually in my original pitch and what was in my revised pitch.
Well, we don't have to go into the details about
No.
it. Everything that Dalton just said is canon.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't heard from Frankenstein for the entirety of Phase 2 yet. Actually, that would make the last of our main heroes, our last of our Dark Legion members from Phase 1 to make a reappearance here.
Yeah.
And we kicked this one down the road quite a bit.
Yes, it is time to do Bride of Frankenstein, which people might notice the plot that I just described contains a lot of elements from Bride of Frankenstein because my Frankenstein movie was based a lot on the novel. And in the novel, all that bride stuff is in the book. They kind of took it out for the Universal movie and then put it in the sequel and kind of split it in half. And of course, they added a bunch of stuff in the sequel, like Dr. Pretorius and a lot of things. But The Bride is in the book, and so a lot of that was covered in my film, which left me with a big question, which is, what do I now do for The Bride of Frankenstein? We have to include it. It's the Universal classic, basically.
Of course, like I think widely considered to be the best of the classic Universal monster movies. Considered like the original superior sequel and one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah, so we couldn't not have a standalone Bride of Frankenstein movie.
Especially since part of the mission of our show is that we're trying to use as much of the plans that they announce for the Dark Universe as possible. And Angelina Jolie was supposed to be the Bride of Frankenstein, supposedly.
And she was in my Frankenstein.
And she appears briefly. She
has no speaking lines.
No speaking lines for Angelina Jolie and your Frankenstein.
She opens her eyes and then catches fire. And that is the extent of Angelina Jolie's role in that movie.
Yeah, we kind of have to. She's as iconic as the creature himself.
So while we're on the subject of how weighty a task this is, why don't we get into our fan expectations? We put it out to you, the listeners, what you would expect or want from our Dark Universe version of Bride of Frankenstein. So what do we got?
Okay, so we have a couple of comments from our friends and fans across social media. Roxanne on our Discord says, I'm expecting a full bait and switch where the bride is someone entirely new rather than the bride set up in the original.
Okay.
Wombat says, one thing I definitely want is for the bride not to be a hot lady with a little monster makeup, but rather a monstrosity on the same level as our icky oozing Victor.
Yeah, I do want to quickly describe our Victor Frankenstein because I don't really do it in the script. Our Victor is played by Javier Bardem. He is an enormous guy. He is a little greenish gray in complexion. But the big thing is that his body is basically rotting. All of the flesh on him is infected, and he is in constant agony. All of the seams and stitching are red and inflamed. He is constantly leaking ooze and pus and thick blood that congeals before he can bleed out.
Right. So now if we were to reanimate a woman in the same style, it would seem like kind of bullshit if she was just like regular hot.
Yeah, because I've gone to great lengths to make our Frankenstein's monster very gross.
Yeah, like granted, now it's been what, better part of 200 years?
If my story takes place in the present.
If even your story. Okay, so.
I also want to say that he is also functionally immortal, which is established in the first movie, that like he's impervious to cold. He has tried to kill himself many times and can't. I think that was in my original pitch and not in the revised version.
I don't think we get that we don't get that on our show until House of Dracula.
Okay. I mean,
where we see that he's living in Antarctica and like it's been 200 years since we last saw him.
Yeah.
Also in that movie, Gwen rips off his arm.
Yes. I don't want to
hits
say
him with it.
He can't be killed at all,
but
because
no one's
that's
done
a
it
narrative
yet.
dead end. But he has been through a lot and is still walking around.
Other things that our audience had to say that was very specific to the James Whale Bride of Frankenstein. Twitter user /pal Jason1749 wants to see the little people from the original Bride. Those who don't know the Bride of Frankenstein, there is a point where they go to this Dr. Pretorius's lab, and inside a little bell jar are just miniature people
that he has created, little homunculi that he has
about the size of your hand.
I do need to comment on this one because I had a moment of panic when I saw this comment, because I will say, I'm not going to spoil too much of the pitch, but my pitch does involve actual little people. And that is not a reference to the little tiny homunculi in Bride of Frankenstein. That was, as soon as I saw that comment, I was like, oh, fuck, I hope this isn't like, I mean, I think in the script, at no point does it feel like a wink or a reference. It is just,
but you want to clarify.
There are characters that are little people, and it is not me trying to be cute and be like, oh, just like the people in the jar. Like, no, that is offensive. It's not related.
All right. Ass properly covered.
Yes, don't cancel me.
And everybody, much like how when we did the Phantom episode, you didn't want to credit like, oh, people were saying it would be great if it was a musical because everyone's saying it. Everybody wants to see big hair and Dr. Pretorius.
Okay.
Overwhelmingly, Dr. Pretorius has been requested, and people expect something interesting in the hairstyle of the bride.
I am scared of the Pretorius Hive. I was not expecting the Pretorius Hive to be that vocal. Dr. Pretorius was invented for the Bride of Frankenstein movie, is not in the book, and it is very clearly a gay queer character, one of the first in cinema, I would imagine. People love Dr. Pretorius. Pretorius is in this movie. I don't know if it's in the way that the Pretorius Hive will want, but give me till the end of the film before you cast judgment, Pretorius heads out there. I don't know if I have done you justice, but I think there's a lot to be pleased about. I don't know. These are the people I'm scared of. The feedback.
The people online
might get mad.
People are already typing furiously.
This might be our Last Jedi.
Yeah. I do wonder because I often go back and I think like, what's the weakest one? Definitely Jekyll X Hyde is like the one I don't think totally works very well. But we didn't have a very vocal listenership at that point.
Yeah.
To tell us, hey, that one was kind of weak. I always wonder what's gonna be the first one where we just make everybody angry or it splits the fan base in half.
Honestly, it might be this one.
You think it might be this one?
And here's why. This is one of my biggest left turns because, as I said, I kind of felt like I had told the Bride of Frankenstein, right? I was sort of backed into a corner where our Bride of Frankenstein, Angelina Jolie, died 200 years ago. Like that body would be rotted to nothing in the present day. And so if I was just going to be, okay, now he's in the present day and we do Bride of Frankenstein, it's like, well, his bride, unless we involve time travel, which I didn't think this was the time to do that.
Yeah, I think it's too early for us to crack open that particular egg.
Maybe phase 4. I also felt that I had given my take on the classic Frankenstein story. And I think, yes, if that Frankenstein movie had come out and the studio wanted a sequel, they would want something in that vein, right? Because you want to give the audience something they expect, you know. But I think on this podcast, one of the fun parts of it is constantly surprising each other and the audience. I've told you this, I don't know if I've mentioned this on air, but my original idea way back in phase 1 for Bride of Frankenstein was to do a buddy romantic comedy with Victor and our invisible man, Jack Griffin, John C. Reilly, as basically co-wingmen trying to pick up women. And that was like, all through phase 1, that was going to be my Bride of Frankenstein. I was like, I'm going to go 180 degrees romantic comedy about these two lonely guys trying to find love.
And then I ruined that for everybody.
You didn't. I did when I decided in the Dark Legion we were going to give him this really dark arc. Jack Griffin, we were going to give him this dark arc. And I really thought he was going to be like, he was not going to be the jovial, fun, let's go on dates kind of Jack in phase 2. But then you used him, and I think the Jack as we have him now at the end of Phantom of the Opera, I think probably could do that movie, but it was our most recent movie, and I don't want to have 2 stealth sequels to The Invisible Man in a row, right?
So what you're trying to say is that a buddy comedy with our Victor and our Jack could still happen in the future.
Who knows? But that idea was kind of dashed. But that was sort of the headspace I was starting at, which was like, I feel like I have done my Mary Shelley, my classic Frankenstein story. How do I do something completely new that is going to interest me, you know, and like make me re-excited about, you know, telling a Victor story. So if you came here hoping for the most straight up remake, since, you know, the original is, as we said, one of the greatest films of all time, if you were hoping we'd hew the closest on this one, I am very sorry. You might be mad at me.
You know what, though? I think the stronger the source material, the more important it is to do your own thing. Because there's no reason, even if with all the budget or the, you know, all the resources in the world, there's no reason to remake Bride of Frankenstein straight up because that movie holds up like a motherfucker.
Yeah, it's great. 100 years later. It's crazy. Well, you've noticed that in the cases where I have had, we've talked about this before, like when I had to do Invisible Man.
Yeah.
There was recently
Full
a perfect
turn.
Invisible Man movie. I did the opposite. And I tried to do the same with My Black Lagoon versus Shape of Water.
Yep.
And it reminds me of, I was talking on Twitter about this recently, Texas Chainsaw Massacre versus Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, where the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the most perfect horror movies ever made. It is actually, in my view, the perfect horror movie. How do you follow that up with a sequel? And Tobe Hooper's solution was, okay, now it's a slapstick comedy and we just dial up everything about it and make it goofy. And I think that's kind of what you have to do with perfect movies is like, do a take that doesn't try to be the original, that tries to chart its own path, So hopefully, give me till the end. If you're not happy with Act 1, give me to the end. I might win you back.
All right. Well, with that, let's kick it into gear.
All right, before we start, I do want to say that this is on the longer side, and I barely got time to edit it. We were talking before we started taping about how our pitches have ballooned. We gave ourselves double the amount of time to write them and just ended up doubling the size of everything we were writing. There was a lot of plot to get through, so this might move kind of fast. It might not be paced perfectly. I was realizing as I wrote it how brilliant your Phantom pitch was, because your pitch not only was a great pitch, but it was written perfectly for the podcast. It is paced perfectly as a 2-hour podcast episode. Everything that needs to happen happens.
Oh, thanks, bud.
And I have been going about these a different way, which is where I am thinking of them purely as movies, which they are not. They are podcast episodes. But
right. I mean, you have a challenge outside of the show. Just for those who aren't up to date on this, Dalton is like developing screenplays right now.
True.
You are alternating right now between working on a novel, working on an album,
yes,
working on this show, and working on a real screenplay.
Yeah.
Which, sorry.
Which you would think then I would make the pitches for this shorter.
You think so, but I can understand your headspace is in. You're in the middle of working on a screenplay, and you're trying to, and then when you jump tracks, you don't want to start inhibiting yourself. You want to let your ideas flow out. Yeah, but just for listeners, what we do here on the podcast, these are not movies so much as they're sketches of movies.
Yes. So before we get started, I want to talk about the director of the film very briefly. I don't have a whole lot to talk about there. The first Frankenstein was directed by Andy Muschietti, who I think was a good choice. But I did decide to get a different director for this film, partially because it has a very different tone. But also, we have been on a fucking hot streak in phase 2 of not having any white guy directors.
Right, because we felt weird that our first 4 picks were all white dudes. And
Yeah.
we're like, that's kind of not really what we're about. We would like to keep it mixing it up. And that streak will continue unless I make a really big change. That streak will continue into my next one.
And I don't think we have to force ourselves to do it. I think
it shouldn't be like a tokenist type thing. It just happens there's a lot of really good directors out there with various different backgrounds.
Yeah, and I think it's fun to push ourselves to think outside the box of what kind of people's vision we could get on these things. So my director for Bride of Frankenstein is Lee Janiak, who people will probably know best from her work directing the Fear Street trilogy for Netflix. But she also directed a great debut feature called Honeymoon, Bride of Frankenstein Honeymoon, starring the girl who was Ygritte on Game of Thrones. Fantastic little spooky body horror movie.
I wish that I had watched that in preparation.
Did you watch Fear Street?
I watched the first 45 minutes of Fear Street Part 1, and
You didn't like it?
I fucking hated it, Dalton.
Wow.
I
Oh,
truly
wow.
found it to be a loathsome film, and I couldn't finish it.
Wow, I remember really liking it, but I have to revisit it.
I mean,
There's a
you
kill
might
at the end is one of my favorite.
Probably just a
kills in
lot
horror
more
movies.
mean than I am.
Yeah, it's a mean movie.
I hated every character, and I also didn't enjoy watching them die.
Fair. Honeymoon is a complete 180 from that. It is
Okay.
a very different style of film. She also directed a couple episodes of The Staircase for HBO Max, so she's like a very skilled director.
Not a judgment on Lee Janiak as a person or even as a director. I saw a sampling of her work. It was so not for me.
That's fair.
So
I'm a Fear Street defender, but it's a mean little slasher. All right, so Lee Janiak will be directing this. I think it will. If you've seen Honeymoon or the Fear Street movies, might become apparent as we go. I mean, obviously the body horror of Honeymoon is already sort of built in, but let's get started. Submitted for the approval of the Universal Studios Board of Directors, I present Dalton Deschaines' The Bride of Frankenstein. Act 1. The year is 1818, the Swiss Alps. We open on a wide shot of Castle Frankenstein standing stoically in the darkness, snow flurries drifting around it. Inside, Victor Frankenstein, played by Javier Bardem, works in his lab under the light of a single candle on his workbench. We see him from behind, hunched and intense. What mad science is he working on? But when we cut around, we see that he's not working with test tubes and potions, but a block of wood and a thin carving knife. In a montage, we see him cutting away sections, working intricate lines of detail and depth into the block. He's interrupted when a young Caroline Frankenstein, only 12 years old, comes bursting into the room.
Father.
Victor jumps and fumbles with the block. He hides it behind him as he turns to face his daughter. Caroline, love, what are you doing in here? You know you're never to disturb me in my lab. A big grin spreads on her face.
Dinner is ready. A boiled hen and scalloped potatoes with butter, and your favorite, our favorite, fried green beans. And for dessert, a 3-layer chocolate cake. And Mom said I can have the first bite and eat as much as I want.
Victor smiles and beckons her closer. That sounds positively scrumptious. Unfortunately, you're going to have to start without me. I've been struck with a bolt of inspiration, and I'm afraid I can't be bothered until I get it all out. Caroline's face falls.
But it's my birthday dinner.
I know, my love. But this idea I've had, well, I think you're really going to like it. I'll show it to you before you go to bed. Would you like that?
Okay.
Victor kisses her on the forehead. Now go enjoy your hen and potatoes and cake as much as you can handle. I'll come in before bed to give you your birthday kisses. Caroline still looks crestfallen, so Victor starts to tickle her, and she shrieks in laughter and flees from him to the door. I'll see you soon, my little wolf cub. He returns to his bench and continues his work in montage. We can now see that he is carving a miniature wolf, about 6 inches long, howling proudly into the night sky. Finally, hours later, he blows the wood shavings off of it and examines it in the candlelight. He heads through the shadowy hallways to Caroline's room and raps on the door. Before she can get out a protest, he enters. She's facing away from him, gathering something on the floor in front of her. She turns to face him in a panic. Hey, wolf cub. I wanted to show you what I was working on. He reveals the wolf carving. For your birthday. I'm so sorry I missed dinner, but I needed to... He stops when he sees 2 black feathers breeze across the floor from behind Caroline. He clutches the wolf in his fist and marches around her to find the dead body of a raven, nailed down on its back by its wings, its abdomen cut open. Caroline has removed several of its organs and spread them out on the floor, her fingers coated in its blood. Victor flies into a rage. What the hell is this? I have told you too many times, no more experiments! He snatches the raven off the ground, tearing off its pinned wings. He squeezes it in his fists in front of her face, blood and guts oozing from his hand in a way that may be familiar to our viewers. No daughter of mine will ever be a natural philosopher. You are a lady, and more than that, you are a child. You should be communing with nature, not lording over it. Make friends, play games, play with toys.
I don't want to make friends. I don't want to play. I don't want your stupid, ugly wolf toys.
Victor steps back, hurt.
I don't want to be a child. I want to be like you.
There would be no graver mistake I could make as a father than to raise a child in my image. He tosses the wolf onto the ground and straightens up. Go to bed. Right this instant. Your birthday is over. And if I ever catch you doing something like this again, you will no longer be a Frankenstein. He slams the door and leaves her quietly sobbing on the floor. The camera pans past her to the severed raven's wings nailed to the ground. As we zoom in on them, they start to violently flap against the ground, flailing desperately against the nails that hold them down, until they finally break free and fly towards the camera. The camera takes off as if carried by them, soaring out the window into the night, moving away from the castle and perching itself on a cliff overlooking the snowy mountains. Lightning flashes the screen white, and when it fades, it's daytime. The mountain has been instantly covered by a ski resort, with an enormous lift cutting down the center of the mountain and a village of cabins resting at the bottom. A tall figure steps into frame, a dark shadow amongst the gusting flurries, surveying the resort below. He wears a long coat with a hood covering his head, gloves, and thick boots. On-screen text tells us it's now the present day. He leaves the frame with a dramatic swirl of his coattails, and we smash cut to one of the cabins in the valley below. Inside, we meet Cassie Falk, played by Meredith Eaton, who viewers might know from the MacGyver remake, standing over an open suitcase, unpacking a number of nice dresses and passing them to her fiancé, Luke Bennett, played by Domhnall Gleeson, to hang up in the closet. Cassie is a woman in her mid-40s, and also, it should be noted, a little person. Her fiancé Luke is around 40 and of standard stature. They're both still in their airport clothes, Cassie in leggings and a sweatshirt, Luke in a ratty white tee and jeans. Throughout the scene, they'll be unpacking and changing into dinner attire. Luke says, "Okay, tell me the name of the circus again."
You do not need to know the name of the circus.
I know. It's not like I'm going to bring it up. I just want to make sure I'm prepared. I don't want to start off on the wrong foot with your dad. Cassie sighs.
The Flying Falcon Traveling Big Top Circus and Sideshow Spectacular.
The Flying Falcon Big Top... No. Traveling Circus?
Luke, baby, you do not need to know the name of the circus.
She looks up at him and he bends to kiss her.
If this were my dream wedding, we would go the entire week without talking about it at all.
Your dream is my dream, Cass. But from what you've told me about your dad, I'm guessing he wakes us up the second we walk through the door. Cassie hops up on the bed and looks out the window at the rest of the snowy, quiet resort.
Gonna be a bad blizzard.
I'll have to keep you extra warm tonight then.
Why did I agree to do the wedding here?
Because it's beautiful, which, matches the whole vibe you have going on. She stares at him. Beautiful, I mean, you are.
Yeah, no, I got it. But what about Hawaii? Hawaii's beautiful.
Well, unfortunately, your ancestors didn't inherit their own resort town in Hawaii a century ago, and so that makes Hawaii very expensive, particularly for two journalists paying Brooklyn rent.
I hate being back here. I'm so anxious already.
Hey, we're gonna get through this. Yes, okay, we've got the family dinner tonight, and that will probably suck, but I'll be there, and Beth, and Henry, so we'll outnumber the carnies 2-1. Then tomorrow, the rest of the wedding parties arrive, and we'll all go to our opposite ends of the resort for our respective bachelor parties. While Luke talks, Cassie just stares nervously out the window. In the distance, through the flurries, she sees the barest silhouette of a man trekking with purpose through the snow in their direction. She squints, just as Luke takes her chin in his fingers and turns her to look into his eyes. Then we get married. And no number of gap-toothed circus folk will ruin that for us. Cassie smiles. And then we leave. We go back home and keep saving for our honeymoon and never have to come back to this place ever again.
I wish. Until the next family member dies and I get guilted into coming back.
Hey, you don't have to feel guilty for not being at your sister's funeral. With the wedding expenses, it was just impossible for us. We'll pay our respects while we're here, and I'm sure your parents will understand.
That's cute. You're cute for thinking that.
My charming naivete is one of my most alluring features.
Yeah, that was the bit that reeled me in.
They look into each other's eyes for a long moment before they're interrupted by a sudden, loud rapping at the door. They look at each other with confusion, and Luke says in a whisper, I thought your parents closed the whole resort.
Maybe it's a groundskeeper or something?
They approach the front door trepidatiously. Luke peers out the side window but can't see anything. Hello? Who is it? The only answer is another loud pounding. They glance at each other again, and then Luke throws the door open. Surprise, bitch! Standing in the doorway is Cassie's maid of honor, Beth Davies, played by Emma Caulfield Ford, aka Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Woo!
Arms wide and a big smile on her face. She pounces and picks up Cassie in a bear hug.
Beth! What the hell? I thought you and Henry were getting it at 5.
So did I, which is why you never leave Henry in charge of scheduling. We barely made final boarding because he remembered the time wrong.
Oh God, you didn't have to sit next to him, did you?
Hell no. Can you imagine? Luke clears his throat. Can we maybe save the roasting of my best man for when I'm not in the room? Luke, baby, it's not your fault. The best man at a straight wedding is supposed to be an asshole. That's how the universe works. Well then, please trust the stars and be nice this week, yeah?
Where is he anyway?
I sent him to drop my bags off at the cabin. He's an idiot, but a useful idiot. She looks at Luke. That's something nice. Beth comes in and they all get settled in the cabin's cozy sunken living room. Luke brings the girls coffee from the Keurig. Okay, so remind me the name of the circus again?
Beth, please.
The Traveling Falcon Sideshow Circus Show.
No, that's not.
And what's your dad's name?
Pretorius.
Pretorius?
Pretorius.
Okay, I am not going to remember any of this.
That's fine, Beth. I'll handle it. If anything about my parents' business comes up, I'll shut it down. I'm not going to spend my wedding week talking about...
Just then, Henry Dixon, played by Lakeith Stanfield, burst through the front door.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, step right up to the freak show.
Beth and Luke yell in unison, Henry!
What?
Henry's POV of the living room. Beth and Luke are looking at him with fury. Cassie just faces away from him, head down and quiet.
Shit, I'm sorry, Cass. Misread the vibe. It's fine.
There's an awkward silence, and then Luke pipes up and suggests that he and Henry go get ready for dinner in Henry's cabin and leave the girls alone. Luke gives Cass a kiss and sets off with Henry. As soon as the door closes, Cassie flops backwards on the couch and lets out a frustrated groan. Talk to me.
I don't want to be here. This is supposed to be the happiest weekend of my life, and for some reason, I agreed to spend it in the snowiest circle of hell.
Wow, I had no idea you hated your family this much.
I don't hate them. It's just... I spent 18 years sitting on my thumbs, waiting until the exact second I get as far away from this place as possible. Not because of them, but because of the circus. I was raised from birth to be a freak, to be gawked at and hollered at, and treated like some alien. I was told that the world wasn't for people like me, and that I had to stay among my kind in a little circus bubble. Do you have any idea what that kind of thinking does to a little girl? A child?
Beth softly shakes her head.
But I refused. It didn't matter if I looked different from everyone else out there. I was the same, and I knew that. And I knew I deserved to be normal, to be myself, to be more than people's first impression of me. Being back here, I feel smaller. I feel reduced to that first impression again. Here I'm a freak again because that's how my family sees me.
So why put up with it? I mean, they're not your real family, right?
I mean, on one hand, yeah, they adopted me like every other freak they found whose parents didn't want them. But that's why I can't just give up on them. The only family I have.
Beth comes closer to comfort her. Not anymore. Now you have Luke, and he adores you for you. You can leave all this behind now. Cassie smiles, her eyes wet with tears.
I'd really given up hope, you know? I didn't think it was going to happen for me.
You found your stride, babe. Time to kick the circus to the curb. Cassie pulls herself together and nods.
I'll get through this week with you, and Luke, and, well, Henry, I guess. And that's it. No more flying falcon.
Atta girl. Now let's look through your suitcase for your dinner outfit. We got to find your best fuck you dress.
Oh my God, I have the perfect one.
They get ready for dinner. Eventually, Henry and Luke come back, and there's more lighthearted banter. Cassie comes out in a slim black dress that makes Luke's jaw drop. They put their coats and boots on and peek at the weather. The sun has set, and the space outside is illuminated by a single spotlight that shines from the peak of the cabin's front wall. It's snowing like crazy, creating beautiful drifts in the untouched expanse. Henry volunteers to pull the van around and is confused when Cassie tells him that's not possible.
Sorry, Henry, but I'm the only one driving tonight. My parents left one van for us, and it's the one built for me.
You want me to come with you, baby?
And leave Beth alone with the scariest freak of all? What kind of friend do you think I am?
Henry flips her off, and she heads out to wade through the thigh-deep snow. She rounds the corner of the cabin, out of the range of the spotlight, and sees something in the dark. Blemishes in the otherwise untouched powder. Footprints. Big ones. She turns on her phone flashlight and follows them right to where they stop, at the back door of the van. Unsettled, she slowly turns the handle for the back door. It's unlocked. She steels herself, then swings the door open and screams, hoping to scare whoever's inside. But there's nobody. She swings the light around, confused, and eventually shuts the door. She pulls herself up into the raised driver's seat with custom pedals designed to fit her frame. She's still rattled, and we play up some more tension here by having the car not start at first. It makes sense, the thing looks ancient. It's an old panel van with rust at its edges and a fading mural on both sides that reads "The Flying Falcon Traveling Big Top Circus and Sideshow Spectacular." Under the chipped red and gold letters is the ghost of a mural featuring different performers. A trapeze artist leaping through the air, a human woman with a lizard's face swallowing a flaming torch, and even Cassie herself sitting on the shoulder of a literal giant. The inside of the van is completely bare bones, all sharp exposed metal, mud caked on the floors. Besides the custom driver's seat and standard passenger seat, there are 2 rows of benches behind with holes in the plastic covers.
Come on, old girl, come on.
The van finally springs to life and she swings it around to the front. Everyone loads in and they head out with more light banter that I would love to keep writing, but have to skip for time. Hopefully you like these people by now. That's my most Dylan Roth opening, I think. all character dialogue.
We love to chat here on the podcast.
Well, usually I don't write the chat. Usually I say, and then they chat, and here's the stuff that happened.
I like it. And naturally, I mean, you've read me. I'm a fan of that. I like, if we're gonna lose some of these people, it's nice to get to know them first. get to spend a little bit of time.
I'm not as good at it as you are.
This is great.
Eventually, they crest a hill to see the massive lodge towering before them. This is the HQ of the resort and home to her family. It glows with amber light in the snowy eve, inviting them into its warm caverns. Everyone is awestruck but Cassie. They park and climb the snowy steps to the front door. Cassie's adoptive father, Pretorius Falk, played by motherfucking Tom Waits.
Yes.
You're welcome, Pretorius Hive. I did give you Tom Waits as Pretorius.
Rocks.
Throws it open before Luke can knock. Cassandra, my chittering little church mouse. I don't do a good Tom Waits, but I'm just gonna get gravelly.
Like, if you have to do the
you
voice,
gotta get
though.
gravelly. Yeah.
Yes.
Cassandra, my chittering little church mouse, how I've missed you. He tries to pick her up in a bear hug, but his back can't take it, and he gets stuck halfway bent over. He greets Luke from waist height. Ah, and you must be the bird of prey that swooped down to take her away from us. Well, you better watch out, Buster. We folks don't let our kind go that easy. He tries to playfully pounce at Luke, but because of his back, he just sort of crab walks towards him with a crazy look on his face. Luke forces a laugh and backs up, legitimately disturbed. Ah, ha ha ha. Don't worry, sir. I'm no hawk. I'm more like a bird who is in love with the church mouse. Take it easy, kiddo. I'm just yanking your braille. And you are?
Henry Dixon, sir. Best man.
Pretorius holds his hand up above his lowered head for a shake and then turns to Beth. And the lovely lady? Beth Davies, maid of honor. It's a pleasure. Pretorius's face falls. He looks confused. Maid of honor? Huh. Yes, well, we'll sort it all out inside. Come on in. He leads them inside and winces as he forces himself back to full height. Everyone gawks at the enormous interior, all wood and glass and warm chandeliers made of antlers. He gives them a tour, which eventually ends in a grand ballroom that looks straight out of Beauty and the Beast, lined with folding chairs that face a podium that definitely looks like if a bunch of circus people designed a stage for a wedding. It's not finished just yet, but this is where we'll have the nuptials. Luke is in awe. Cassie is still trying to look skeptical, but we can tell even she's impressed. Oh my God, Mr. Falk, this is incredible. You didn't have to do all this for us. Don't be silly. Anything to make little Cassie's day a special one.
Thank you, Dad.
Sure thing, Cass. Although, if I had things my way, we'd be doing this at the Tom Thumb house.
Oh my God. No, absolutely not.
Why not?
That place is so creepy. I don't even like thinking about it. Blah.
Henry pokes his head into their convo.
I'm sorry. A of all, who is Tom Thumb? And B of all, what's the deal with this house? He's no one. It's nothing.
Her dad ignores her and is about to start the story when they're interrupted by Cassie's mother, Lillian Falk, played by Jane Fonda, entering.
Wow, you really are pulling out all the stops for this one.
Yeah, this is a star-studded fucking event. I felt like after last episode was just all Lost actors, I was like, I should get some movie stars in this one. Her mom, Lillian, says, Pretorius, are you hiding my daughter away from me? Uh-oh, now I'm in trouble. Everybody, the shining angel you see before you is the most daring trapeze artist to ever grace the big top tent, formerly. Please put your hands together for my wife, Lillian Falk. Luke, Beth, and Henry actually play along and applaud her. I mean, it's Jane Fonda. She deserves it. Then someone new peeks her head in the door that Lillian just entered from, and Lillian turns to introduce her. Oh, and this is the current crown jewel of the Flying Falcon Circus,
Sally?
Salamandra Ghirardelli. Salamandra Ghirardelli, played by Genevieve O'Reilly, aka Mon Mothma from Andor and the recent Star Wars stuff,
Oh, neat.
enters. She wears a green dress patterned to look like scales. Her eyes are yellow and her skin pale and oily all over. She glides over to Cassie. It's clear the two have a strained relationship.
You wore the contacts to dinner. Really? It's nice to see you too, Cass. You gonna wear them to the wedding too?
Salamandra greets the other guests while Cassie pulls her mom aside.
Why is Sally here?
You said you wanted your maid of honor at the dinner.
My maid of honor is at the dinner. Beth, my best friend.
What? Cassie, no. How could you?
How could I what?
Before the argument can continue, Pretorius claps his hands and invites everyone to the dining room. There's a bounty of hors d'oeuvres and a massive stew on the stove, all prepared by Lillian. Pretorius tells everyone that she doubled as the circus's cook and was half the reason they were able to get the big names like Salamandra to join their ranks. There's a long dining table, and Henry makes a beeline for the head of it.
Ooh, dibs on the captain's chair.
Luke clears his throat, and Beth looks at him in disbelief. I'm sorry, friend, but that spot is reserved for the lady of the house.
Oh my God, you're right. I'm so sorry.
He gets up, but manages to still take the wine glass that was there for himself. He takes a sip, then notices everyone looking at him in the awkward silence.
So, Tom Thumb? Oh no.
Oh, yes, the General. General Tom Thumb was the most famous dwarf to ever live, although he would have been bested by Cass if she had stayed with it.
No, thank you.
Why, he's the one who put P.T. Barnum on the map. He was one of the biggest celebrities of his day. Hell, he was even friends with old honest Abe Lincoln. He spent a good chunk of his life touring Europe, meeting royalty and becoming very, very rich. So rich that he built this entire ski resort right here so he and his wife Lavinia could have a place to unwind. Before he returned to the States for good, he left the whole place to my grandfather, and it's been in our family ever since. And thank God he did, because ringmaster is not the career it used to be. This place brings in the money that keeps us up and running. And you said something about his house? Yes, built himself a mansion just a stone's throw from here. One of the two main historical centerpieces of the resort. Tourists love it. They wait in line all day for a look-see inside. You see, what's remarkable about it...
What's remarkable is that we're still talking about a dead dwarf and his ghastly house, and frankly, it's offensive that you would have wanted to have my wedding there.
Pretorius softens. I'm sorry, Cass. I'll stop rattling. He winks at Luke and Henry. But you should check it out during the bachelor party. Things continue. There's more chatter, maybe a montage of conversations where we match up characters who haven't talked much yet and see how they interact. The fun is cut short when Henry suddenly doubles over and staggers against the table. Whoa, buddy, you okay?
Yeah, just a pain in my stomach is, oh.
He vomits all over the floor. Everyone snaps into action, Luke and Beth helping Henry while Cassie and her mom get towels. There's some heated conversation and debate about what to do, and it's decided that Luke will take Pretorius' car to help Henry back to his cabin, then come back by dessert. Luke helps Henry into his coat and guides him outside. Henry is not looking good. This leaves just Cassie, Beth, Pretorius, Lillian, and Salamandra for dinner. It's awkward. Beth tries to keep the mood light by asking Cassie's parents about their heyday in the circus. They talk about their trapeze act together, how they could do it blindfolded without a net. But isn't that, like, crazy dangerous? Pretorius and Lillian look at each other and grin, then say in unison, in their best showboat voices,
Danger? Ha! We don't give a flying falk. Oh my God.
What was that? That was our line. The Flying Falcon. The English-speaking crowds loved it. But those days are behind us. Salamandra here is the only one still performing. Hired her back when her and Cass were just kids. Now she's the most senior performer in the show. Salamandra, why don't you tell Cassie what you have planned for her bachelorette party tomorrow?
What? No, Beth already has the day planned because she is my maid of honor.
I thought we talked about this, Cassie. Salamandra has been looking forward to this all month. She's your oldest friend.
And Beth is my best friend, who, I actually see and spend time with.
Salamandra is just looking down at her food while they argue. Beth jumps in, trying to be helpful. Maybe we could combine our plans. I mean, it's an empty ski resort. How different could the itineraries be anyway?
I thought we could all take various antidotes and see who could ingest the most drops of poison without getting sick.
Okay, so that wasn't on my list, but I'm sure we could make room.
No, we are not doing any of Sally's weird freak show stuff. I am an adult woman. This is my wedding, and I get to choose who my maid of honor is.
The room falls silent. After what seems like an eternity, Lillian quietly says, Fine. I just thought that since you didn't even attend Elsa's funeral, you'd be willing to do at least one thing for your family.
She's not family. She's a former coworker.
Cassie hops down from her chair and storms out of the room.
I need some fresh air.
Back at the table, Beth waits a beat and turns to Sally. So, what's your favorite poison to ingest? Outside.
I gotta say, Emma Caulfield is really great casting for this.
When I stumbled upon that, I was like, oh, fuck, she's perfect for this. Slam dunk. Outside, Cassie blinks back tears and folds her arms on the porch. She checks her phone. No bars, of course. A sudden slamming sound in the distance makes her look up. The snowy night is endless and quiet, the only sound the howling of the wind. She takes a few steps off the porch.
Luke, are you guys still here?
Another sound from her left, near the van. She walks towards it and circles it once, looking for the source of the sound. Nothing. It's freezing, and she braces herself against the cold before deciding to hop in the van to warm up. She shuts herself in and rubs her hands together. She starts to quietly curse her mom and her dad and Sally, working herself up until she screams with rage, the sound reverberating through the metal paneling of the van and then fading to silence. She pants and leans her head against the wheel. Suddenly, an enormous figure rises from the bench behind her. It wears the heavy coat we saw at the beginning of the film, and its face is covered by a leather Commedia dell'arte mask, that of the character Brigella, crimson red and hideous. The mask covers just the top half of the face, while the bottom is concealed with a black veil, creating the appearance that the figure has no lower jaw. The figure reaches forward and grabs Cassie by the neck. She screams for an instant before it's choked out of her, the figure strangling her with everything he's got. She's pulled back out of her seat, kicking at the wheel, grasping at the enormous hands around her neck, but it's no use. Then, a second enormous figure rises from the bench behind the first. It's Victor Frankenstein, and he grabs the masked stranger by his neck and begins to strangle him in turn. Freeze frame. Title card. The Bride and Frankenstein. End of Act 1.
Well, I think that your warning this was not going to be what anybody expected was well-founded.
Yes.
It's very... I mean, I'm always into that. Like, when we entered into this creative partnership, it was always the idea that you are the horror devotee and I am the snarky film critic. for whom none of this is particularly sacred. So you're rarely going to bother me by deciding to not do something that I expect out of the horror canon. This is very unexpected. So far, it's almost all original characters. With a plot that bears no resemblance to the Bride of Frankenstein, and I still have no idea how it's going to fit in.
So I had a very simple idea. As we said, I felt like I'd already put my stamp on Frankenstein. I had really already done our Bride plot. So I was like, I want to do some kind of big swing with this. I want to take a left turn. And one day, I wasn't even thinking about Bride of Frankenstein. I was thinking about slasher movies. And I was thinking, we don't have a slasher movie in the dark universe yet. And there's really no opportunity because it's a monster universe, right? Like all these are monster movies. And I was thinking like, what would like a slasher dark universe movie be? Where could it fit in? And I thought about Bride of Frankenstein because it was my next thing. And I was like, well, that wouldn't work. And then I was like, well, how would you do it though? And the idea was basically, what if you dropped Victor Frankenstein in the middle of a slasher movie that was already ongoing? And that was my idea. And so we have a very slasher movie setup here. Everyone's remote in this ski lodge. I mean, obviously, it's kind of a unique slasher movie. All the circus stuff is original. That's all my
and I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. But it was really like, well, what would that be like if, a slasher movie is happening and Victor just happened to be passing through and stumbled upon this? And the answer is kind of like, oh, well, the good guys would have their own Michael Myers. Like you would have two opposing slasher forces. You would have, because your slasher archetype is your Michael Myers, this unkillable, unstoppable, killer. Now we have one playing on the other team unexpectedly. And it kind of reminded me of, I think the most direct slasher reference for this is You're Next, which is one of my favorite slashers.
That movie fucking bangs.
And it's a slasher movie where the victim turns the tables on the killer and ends up having one up. And so this is a sort of variation on that, where now the victims have someone, a good guy, a good slasher on their side. And I thought it would be very fun. We talked about in our first episode how part of the fun of the dark universe would be mixing tropes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, the opportunity to mix Frankenstein tropes with slasher tropes was too fun of an idea to pass up on. I was like, I have to tease that thread all the way out.
Well, I think that's a really exciting idea. I do think that we are hitting a little bit the limitations of having to do this in the format of the podcast. Because I imagine if you're doing a full act one, we probably get introduced to the concept of this slasher more than 2 seconds before we're introduced to Victor, right?
I mean, I try to tease it out with Cassie sees someone stalking through the snow towards them.
Right.
There's the footprints around the van door being unlocked, So I try to set up ahead of time that like someone is out there besides them, And we see the figure at the beginning. There's maybe the fake out of, is this just Victor Frankenstein that's here? Is it something malicious? Is he malicious? He's only very recently been a good guy,
That's true.
So we don't actually know that he's not going to be a killer here. So it's
I'm just wondering if it maybe makes sense to have somebody, to have there be a victim and have the characters be aware of a killer for some period of time before the audience is filled in on what's really going on.
Yeah. I wanted to do it this way also because I wanted to do the late title reveal. I didn't want to wait too long before Victor was introduced because I feel like in my act one, I want to set up the premise, and there's still going to be a lot that happens here. And the general premise was Frankenstein and a killer. And, so
right. And how long do you want to string people around before they know what the movie's about?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair point.
It's sort of like, the late title reveal done recently to great effect in non-horror movies like Drive My Car, but also like fresh on Hulu, where I like those movies where they wait a long time to really set up the core of their premise before they drop the title on you. And of course, The Bride and Frankenstein, I did do a title change here because thinking about, a slasher movie with Frankenstein, I was like, well, it's The Bride of Frankenstein. So who's the bride? Well, the final girl, right? If I'm matching it up with a slasher movie, the bride is the final girl. But if it's a slasher movie, I don't have time for them to fall in love and become a bride, given where we are at in our canon, before the slasher starts. So she's someone else's bride.
Yeah, she's getting married to somebody else.
Yeah, and so it's a bride teaming up with Frankenstein. Although, don't worry, bride heads, there will be much more relation to the Bride of Frankenstein as we go on.
This is our second in a row misleading title situation.
Yes.
because we did the Phantom of the Opera last time.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple other things. I'm scribbling down my notes as we go. We have this scene to Caroline's childhood with
Yes.
the pre-undead Victor.
Yes.
And I imagine that it is deliberate, planting the seeds for something that Victor is making this wolf toy. You and I have talked a little bit when we were working on House of Dracula about the idea of the sort of relationship that he's been building with Gwen Conliffe, our wolf woman, who he kind of imprints on a little bit.
Yeah.
So I like the idea that even if it doesn't come back up in this movie, although I kind of have a sneaking suspicion it might, that we have this little thing of where there might be a little bit of extra subliminal connection that makes him attached to this person. Also, really not important. I think, didn't we have a Henry in the last one of these?
Did we?
Wasn't Caroline's husband Henry?
Was he Henry Clerval?
Pretty sure.
I honestly don't.
I remember because the Frankenstein in the Universal is Henry Frankenstein.
Then it's a reference.
Okay.
Then it's a
Did it
wink
on purpose.
to the first one. Yeah. It's definitely intentional.
But what I really want to dig into is the circus stuff, because this is a subject that you've written about a lot, actually, in your music and in your novel. You have a certain fascination with circus and carny culture and history,
specifically freak shows, especially. I've done a lot of research on old circuses and freak shows because, for those that don't know, my band as a concept band, tells a horror story about a circus in the 1940s, and we have a song called "Freak Show." It's very heavily circus themed. Yes.
All right, and so we have this, and I don't have the authority to throw up red flags or be offended on anybody else's behalf. I'm going to assume that you've done the research about the relationship between being a little person in the circus at some period of time and what that's like being second generation or whatever in recent years.
Yes.
And I'm gonna skip right ahead to saying that I think I'm racking my brain, and apart from Willow, I can't think of a major studio movie where the lead is played by a little person.
Well, that's partially why I wanted to do
cool.
this. I wanted to make the lead because I was thinking about freak shows, because I was thinking about who would be a good foil for Frankenstein, for Victor. And the freak show culture is sort of a weird mirror image of that. I mean, yes, I do want to clarify. I also use the word dwarf in here. I did a lot of research. Dwarf is an acceptable term for little people as well. Dwarfism is the medical name for the condition. They generally don't like dwarves because that brings to mind Seven and, not the movie Seven, but Snow White and the Seven, as well as, Lord of the Rings and stuff. So it's dwarfs would be the plural.
And I understand she refers to herself as a short stature actress.
Yes. So for a long time, the circus was pretty much the place of employment for little people. A lot of people don't know this, but right here in New York City, in Coney Island, there was a whole place called it was, offensive name City, where it was literally a 2-scale town that was populated by hundreds of little people, and you could go in and walk among them, and that was really how you could make money. And Tom Thumb is a real person. All this history stuff about General Tom Thumb is true. He is the most famous little person to ever live, one of the most famous circus performers to ever live, really did make P.T. Barnum's whole career. The whole bit about him owning a ski lodge in the Alps is made up for these purposes. Okay. But the rest of it is all true.
Hung out with Abe Lincoln?
Yes, absolutely. Abe Lincoln gave him wedding gifts. They were very close. He was close with a lot of royalty. He was one of the most famous people in the world, Tom Thumb.
Well, I mean, the fact that I've heard the name before and I don't know a lot about the history of circuses or carnivals, it says something.
But obviously, throughout the 20th century, the public's perception about freak shows changed because it was a lot of gawking at people for disabilities and making them outsiders. But during their heyday, it was kind of a complicated relationship because, yes, you were being objectified for things that were out of your control, but also you were a star and you were making a living. And so different freaks had very different reactions. Some people felt used by the experience. Some people felt grateful that they were these celebrities, and most felt both, right? I hate that this is what I have to do, but I'm glad I'm successful in making money and not dead at the age of 16 or something, I thought it was interesting to play with the idea of sort of a legacy act in Europe that has sort of kept the bit going because of outside financing, and someone who grows up into a world where she doesn't have to do that anymore. And in contrast to Caroline, who wants desperately to be part of the family business and gets thrown out for it, Cassie wants nothing to do with the family business and is trying to get away from that as soon as possible because she recognizes how objectifying and offensive the entire freak show thing is, and she just wants to be the main character. She wants to be the protagonist. She doesn't want to be the freak on the stage. She wants to be the person that she is, you know? And I thought that's similar to Victor's struggle, where he's like, I'm a person inside here and no one will give me the chance to be that person, which is why I'm so angry all the time, you know? And playing with different notions of people being judgmental and looking different from the people around you and taking ownership of your own narrative.
Far out. Then do we want to, as you know, I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit now talking about the relationship between these characters. Let's dig into it. Let's get into the meat of Act 2.
Yes, Act 2 is the longest, but our Act 3 is very short. We'll talk about why when we get there. Full speed ahead. Act 2. The freeze frame releases. I do imagine we would hold on that freeze frame with like all the credits coming up over the image of Frankenstein choking the guy, choking
Cassie.
Cassie.
I thought that would be funny. Also, this is definitely lighter than I imagined. Like so far, You're Next is a good watchword for this because that is a slasher movie that gets heavy and gets really gnarly and really bloody, but is like always funny for the whole thing. I
think mean slashers can be fun, like Fear Street, but the genre is so done to death at this point that I think playing with the tropes is fun, and that's always going to have kind of a lighter. I mean, the whole point of this, the premise of this movie is to play with slasher tropes, and so it's going to be a little bit lighter. Yeah,
that's the thing is that I didn't find any levity or fun in the Fear Street movies. I felt like all the jokes were just like, I hate all of them. I hate all of them. I like all of these characters. So
good.
Yeah.
I have bad news for you.
Oh no, I'm sure they're gonna. In a slasher, you want to like some of them.
Yes,
some
you
of them,
do.
Some of them in a slasher movie, you want some of them to be people you feel bad when they die. You want some of them to be the ones who get the funny kills, the fun kills, the ones who kind of have it coming. You got to have that mix.
I will warn you, I do get mean a little bit.
All right,
here we go.
Some mean is okay. I don't think you need to protect the audience's feelings all the time. A little bit, just a little bit.
The freeze frame releases and the three-person struggle continues. The masked attacker, clearly surprised by Victor, lets go of Cassie, wriggles out of Victor's grasp, and escapes into the night. Victor reaches forward to try to touch Cassie's shoulder. You must go. It isn't safe. But Cassie recoils from him, screaming. She opens the door and falls from her seat to the ground, landing hard and scrabbling through the snow away from Victor. Victor follows. Please, you must listen to me.
What? What are you? Get away from me!
She climbs to her feet and runs to the house, leaving Victor looking concerned, his arm extended towards her. Cassie bursts back into the house and runs to the dining room, yelling that there are two men outside that tried to kill her. Beth and her mother try to calm her down as she breathlessly explains what just happened in the van. Then she notices there's one person missing. Pretorius.
Wait, where's Dad?
He went out after you, hon.
Oh no, we have to get him. They're gonna kill him.
Salamandra has been standing quietly in the back, observing this whole thing. Now she chimes in.
I'll get him.
She glides across the room down a nearby hallway, and they hear her open a closet door. She comes back, slamming a clip into a handgun. The ladies all steel themselves and walk slowly to the front door, listening for any sound, but there's only the wind. Salamandra leads, gun raised and ready, the other three women clustered behind her. They stop at the door, take a deep breath, and Salamandra swings it open, revealing Victor Frankenstein. He looms large in the doorway as lightning from the coming blizzard cracks in the distance behind him. Salamandra raises the gun and fires all 6 shots straight into his chest. He staggers back a couple steps, looks down at the oozing holes. He's unharmed. He looks back up at them and opens his mouth to speak, but Salamandra slams the door in his face. She looks truly shaken by the sight of him.
What the hell was that thing? I told you! Back door?
The women nod and break into a run, heading for the glass-walled rear of the lodge. Salamandra gets there first and tells the other women to stand back this time. Then, crash! The masked attacker hurls himself through the glass and tackles Salamandra to the ground. She raises the gun to shoot, but it just clicks. She spent all the bullets. The attacker knocks it away and it goes skittering under a couch. The other women run toward him, and he sees he's outnumbered, so he grabs Salamandra by the hair and begins to drag her screaming out of the room. The women follow, and then Cassie says,
Wait, Mom, the gun!
Beth and Cassie scramble to move the couch while Lillian fishes stray bullets out of a drawer. They can hear Sally's screams echoing through the halls and rush each other along so they don't lose her. They give chase and follow the sound to the ballroom. When they open the door, the attacker is dragging Salamandra down the center of the aisle between the folding chairs, the chairs erupting into the air as she kicks them and he throws them out of his path. The clatter of the chairs and the screams create an echoing cacophony in the enormous room. Lillian raises the gun shakily and fires 3 shots that all miss. The attacker makes his way into the next room and slams the door behind him. The 3 women once again give chase, but Cassie, who's in the back, is pulled back by 2 large hands, one of them covering her mouth so she can't scream. Lillian and Beth leave her behind as she's pulled into the dark hallway. Victor Frankenstein picks her up and holds her to his chest, his hand still over his mouth as she kicks and flails. "You must listen to me. Though my countenance may appear frightening, I promise I am not your enemy." Cassie gives a muffled response. Victor lets his hand off her mouth.
If you're not my enemy, prove it by letting me go.
He places her gently back on her feet.
Who the hell are you?
"My name is Victor Frankenstein. I am a drifter, just passing through."
Just passing through the fucking Alps in the middle of a blizzard?
"That is correct. Now pay attention. You must gather your family and take the lift to the top of the mountain. There's a place there where I can keep you safe."
What? No, we're not going further up the mountain. We need to go down if we can get away from here.
"You will not make it. Please, meet me at the peak. I'll try to keep them off of you until then."
Wait, them?
Victor nods gravely. "There are 2. Now go, quickly." While this conversation is happening, we intercut with Beth and Lillian, who have followed the attacker to the locked door he passed through. Lillian doesn't have her keys on her. They try forcing it, all the while hearing a loud struggle on the other side. A struggle it sounds like Sally is losing. Finally, they stand back and Lillian aims the gun at the lock. Beth notices Cassie isn't with them and asks where she went, but then bang! The lock explodes and the door swings open, revealing Sally and the attacker are struggling in the middle of a grand reading room, an enormous fire roaring in a grand stone fireplace. The attacker has a poker in his hand and is trying to push it up through the underside of Sally's jaw while Sally resists. Lillian yells out Sally's name, and Salamandra looks up. The attacker takes the opportunity to kick her backwards, and she staggers back directly into the fireplace. She screams and struggles to get up, but the attacker drives the poker through her dress, pinning her down, then flees while Sally burns. By the time Cassie runs back through the ballroom, it's too late. Beth meets her, a hollow look in her eyes, and tells her that the man got Sally. They can hear Lillian sobbing from the next room. Cassie takes charge and says they need to leave now because there's 2 of those maniacs out there. First step, find her dad. Lillian emerges into the ballroom, tear streaks on her face, and the 3 of them cautiously approach the front door once more. This time when they swing it open, nobody's there. They step out onto the snowy porch and jump scare! Pretorius collides with them, out of breath.
Is the show's first proper jump scare?
Jump scare!
Jump scare!
Some highlights from this upcoming scene. They all reunite. They ask where Pretorius was. He says he was out looking for Cassie and heard gunshots. He also went to try to start the van, but someone wrecked the engine. The family fills him in. He's devastated by the Salamander news. Cassie tells them there's 2 killers. Beth says they should call the cops. Pretorius says they'd never make it up the mountain in this weather in time, but if they hop on the ski lift here, they can take it down to the parking lot where there's a shuttle bus they can use to get out of here. Cassie points out they also need to get Luke and Henry once they're on the bus. She doesn't mention her conversation with Frankenstein. Lillian gives the gun to Pretorius, and they head out into the snow, Pretorius in the lead. Eventually, after more dialogue and downtime after our big action sequence that I don't have the space to write, Pretorius stops walking and squints down the mountain. "Son of a broad tosser." They follow his gaze. It's Frankenstein, stomping through the snow down the mountain, heading towards the next ski lift station, the one they were going to take the lift to. Cassie looks past him and sees the faintest shadow of another figure even farther away and realizes he's following one of the killers. Nobody else thinks that far ahead. Pretorius starts running as best as he can through the snow towards Frankenstein.
Wait, Dad!
He turns back. "I need to stop him before he gets to that station."
We need to stick together!
She tries running after him, but the snow that's knee-deep for everyone else is stomach-deep for her. It's clear to everyone that they wouldn't catch him. "You 3 get to the ski lift and wait for my signal that it's safe to come down." He runs away before they can ask what the signal is. Then Beth asks, "Wait, you said there were 2 of them?"
Yeah, why?
"Well, he just went after one of them, but he took the only gun." They hurry the rest of the way with renewed vigor. While they walk, the 3 of them theorize about who the killers could be. Local lunatics? Disgruntled circus freaks? I mean, Pretorius is basically a professional con man. He could have any number of enemies. Beth asks if she recognizes the one whose face they've seen, the pale guy with all the sores and scars. Cassie says,
I don't think he's one of them.
"Wait, what?"
He saved me from one of the masked guys in the van. He told me afterwards he was just passing through and trying to help.
"And you believed him?"
I don't know yet. but he's the one who told me there were 2 others. I think he meant 2 people in that mask.
Beth sits with this a moment. You don't think...
What?
I mean, Luke and Henry left awfully suddenly.
I'm sorry, what?
Lillian cuts her off. We're here. They look up at the ski lift, a massive, state-of-the-art transportation system with stops all up and down the mountain, from the parking lot to the cabin village to the lodge, and then all the way up to the peak. Victor was making his way to the cabin stop, one down from them. They huddle in the boarding area, trying to keep each other warm. Beth and Cassie resume their argument about Henry and Luke being the killers, which I would love to write out, but I need to keep things going. Basically, Beth is trying to just make sure they keep an open mind, but Cassie says it's ridiculous. Henry is annoying, sure, but neither of them could kill anybody. Beth asks how well Cassie really knows Luke. Cassie sputters indignantly, but then they're cut off by the sound of gunfire. 2 shots. They tense up. Was that the signal? Should they go down and find out anyway? What if Pretorius is hurt? Beth and Cassie climb into the lift while Lillian works the controls. Before Lillian pulls the lever, Cassie says, wait, remembering Victor's words about going to the peak. But he's not even there. She's seen him below. Plus, they need to rescue Luke and Henry. This all is not stated, but hopefully the audience catches on that this is what she's thinking. She says nothing, never mind, and all 3 of them head down the mountain, suspended high above the ground. The resort is dark and ominous, and the raging wind rattles them back and forth. They peer into the darkness for any signs of life, but there's nothing. Then the lift abruptly grinds to a halt, just 30 yards or so from the station. A loud clattering sound comes from the station, and they briefly see 2 figures wrestling in the window before the light goes out. Lillian screams for her husband, but they're stuck, helpless. The 3 of them look down. They're still at least 4 stories above the ground. They'd never survive the jump. They look ahead at the dark station and possibly far away. I can make it, Lillian says. Cassie follows her gaze to the cable above the lift.
Mom, no, you can't.
I'm retired, but I'm not dead. I could do that walk in my sleep.
Not in this weather. It's too dangerous.
Lillian looks at her daughter with a mischievous smile. Danger? Ha! I don't give a flying falk. With a slightly arthritic grace, Lillian pulls herself up on top of the lift car, then balances herself delicately on the cable. The wind blows her hair violently, but she's not shaken. She simply ties it back into a tight bun, closes her eyes, and takes a step out onto the wire. She continues this high wire act with her eyes closed, and we cut to Cassie and Beth watching her from below, terrified. A big gust of wind shocks her enough that one foot comes sliding off, but she recovers. Finally, after what seems like forever, she's only a few yards away from the station. She opens her eyes and gives that same smile, a smile that says, I've still got it. But just then, the lights in the station come back on. It looks empty at first, but then Victor pops up in the window, waving his arms desperately. You must go back, he shouts over the wind. He's here, you must go back. Lillian pauses on the wire, and then another voice yells out into the night. Hey, ugly! It's Pretorius. He stands behind Victor, aiming the pistol at him. Stay away from my woman. No, you don't understand. Bang! Pretorius fires a shot straight into Victor's heart, but the bullet passes through harmlessly, traveling through his body and out the back, straight towards Lillian behind him. The bullet grazes her cheek and she recoils, just enough to knock her off balance. She pinwheels her arms in the air, trying to regain her footing as Beth and Cassie scream for her from the lift. She falls, plummeting to the ground and crumpling as she hits the snow. We linger on her body to see that yes, she's dead. Pretorius, devastated, runs out of the control room to go to his wife. Victor gives a sorrowful look to Cassie, then flips the lever to send them back up the mountain. Cassie screams for her mother as the lift takes her away. We see her POV of her father wailing over his wife's corpse, getting smaller and smaller until his cries are drowned out by the wind. That's halfway through Act 2.
Woo!
Do you want to talk about it before the break?
No, let's take our break. Let's take a minute. Let's give ourselves a moment to breathe and to grieve for the late Jane Fonda's character.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be right back after these words from the Podosphere.
What's up, Internet Bookworms? My name is Jason.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Bella.
And we are the hosts of the sci-fi fantasy book podcast, Shit We've Read.
What is Shit We've Read?
Well, Shit We've Read is where the 3 of us get together to talk about the shit we've just read.
But don't forget about our author conversations too.
And we also have to mention our popular After Dark episodes where we get a little bit steamier with our good friend Emma Skies.
That's right. So if you're a fan of science fiction and fantasy,
Or if you just love a good book discussion,
then you're in the right place.
Shit We've Read is available to listen to now wherever you get your podcasts or at shitwe'veread.com.
So follow us on social media at Shit We've Read for updates, behind the scenes content, and to join the discussion.
And happy listening.
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? We are halfway through The Bride and Frankenstein, and we have just gotten to our first kind of slasher movie section with some deaths here.
Yeah, rip to Jane Fonda's character.
And Salamandra.
And Salamandra. She burned to death, which I recognize the sort of visual callback to the thing on the side of the van where there's a lizard spitting fire.
Swallowing fire.
Swallowing fire, and she's swallowed by fire.
I'm already doing a trope mashup with Frankenstein and a slasher movie, which we'll get to a lot more of that. But I also thought it was fun to do circus slasher movie stuff with like sort of the high wire act that happens with
Lillian.
Lillian.
That was a really cool set piece for this character. I think that also, you always talk about, fulfilling various promises that you make to your audience, either in the beginning, at some point, you have a trapeze act that is introduced conceptually, and then you have the sort of the doubt in your mind. You don't immediately think, okay, she's definitely gonna do a trapeze thing, because Jane Fonda's up there in years.
Yeah.
And then you make that a thing, right? And it's kind of cool to see her do it, and she has that confidence, and it's working out, and then she has this tragic death that is actually not, she was up to the task, actually. And it's just that Tom Waits does not know that Frankenstein is Frankenstein.
Just a bullet sponge,
Yeah. And also, like, you have now this unfinished business between Cassie and her parents. With her mother, she can't resolve it now, right?
Yeah.
Their last conversation was a fight. That's hard. She has one parent now left who she's now separated from, who she's going to have to worry about and hopefully get some measure of closure with that, which could help her maybe to heal about the other losses that she's almost certainly going to continue getting. I don't hold out hope that Beth's going to last much longer. Her husband's missing, like Keith Stanfield is missing.
Yeah. Which brings me to one aspect of this. This is a slasher movie that is a whodunit, which I have never done before. I have never done the kind of like, they're already speculating about who the people in the masks are, right?
Yeah.
This isn't like a straight Michael Myers thing where it's like he's just the embodiment of evil. Like someone is trying to kill them. I've never written anything like that before where there's like, I have to write a reveal. And Act 2 is partially so long because it turns out when you're doing that, you have a lot of pieces to move around.
Yeah,
Like,
and you have to introduce enough suspects to make that fun. Now, of course, anybody who's listening to the show is probably already aware that one of the favorite movies that Dalton and I have in common is Scream. We both love the fuck out of Scream.
Yeah.
And, that's like the example of this kind of thing. So I'm curious because right now we don't have a lot of suspects. I feel like you're going to have to spend Act 2 introducing us to more characters who it could be. Because right now, the only two people who are missing are Luke and Henry.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be Luke and Henry.
I'm interested to see how well I pull this off because it has been a little nerve-wracking. I also feel like, though, because this is a podcast first draft thing, I get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt where some people might not figure out who it is just because they don't know how smart I am at this.
Right.
Like sometimes with Scream, it's like, I know that it wouldn't be that person because they're too good at this, but like, I might not be good at this, And
this is also harder to do in a medium where you are directly giving your audience every piece of information that they're going to need. You can't sneak something into the background of a scene that you're describing to somebody.
Right.
It's really hard to do that effectively. Like, obviously, novelists do it. It can be done.
But that's also when there's so much detail that a stray thing can end up being consequential that wasn't first. But in this kind of pitch thing, pretty much everything I write has to be consequential on some level.
Right. We give you very little that you don't essentially need because we're trying not to take up your entire day. And also we have to write these really, really fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's, anything else that you want to talk about or set up while we go there? I didn't scribble anything down during that section.
Nice.
I was just generally into it.
The rest of Act 2 is long, and it's because I kind of think the end of Act 2 might kind of be part of my Act 3, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But I thought it made sense to keep it all together. So the act 3 will be a lot shorter than my normal climaxes.
Sure.
Don't make that a sex thing.
Oh, I also forgot when I was saying the thing earlier. There was recently one. I can think of literally one movie in this century so far that's a major studio picture that uses a little person as the lead of the film, which is Cyrano, starring Peter Dinklage.
Yes.
And that's literally it.
There, obviously, like, people might raise an eyebrow at all the circus connections that are in here, but I think truly that I would hope anyway that is outweighed by the fact that our final girl in a slasher movie is a little person and she's the main character. And while, yes, that is something she has as baggage, I don't think it is going to be what defines her character.
Sure. It's difficult when it's something that's very important to the character and outside your experience as a writer. I think I've said in the past that, like, in my Wolfman, it's important to Larry's background that he's a black man, but I can't tell a story about being black because I haven't lived that experience, right? And so I think it's a tightrope walk, to try and do this with somebody whose experience you haven't lived. And I imagine that were we to push forward into the script phase here, you probably want to we're probably consulting, but you also
we get consultants,
of course,
sensitivity readers.
This is a podcast that we're doing pretty much entirely for free, and you can't ask somebody to do a sensitivity read for free. That's
when
kind
I
of
do this kind of stuff, I focus on sort of the idea of her being an outsider. But again, this isn't the story of why she left the circus. This is a story of someone trying to kill her and her trying to live to see her wedding. So should we move forward? Any other thoughts?
No, let's rock on.
All right. Act 2 continued. As the lift passes back up through the lodge boarding station, Beth hops out and pulls the brake so it doesn't keep going up to the peak. Cassie stumbles out of the car, clearly very shaken by losing her mother, unable to really speak. Beth grabs her by the arm. Come on, Cass. We have to find a place to hide.
What? No, my dad. We have to go back.
No, babe. That thing is down there, and we'll be sitting ducks in the snow. Your dad will come to us. Now, did you ever have, like, an emergency meeting place when you were a kid? You know, like if the lodge caught fire, a place where the residents were supposed to meet up. Cassie looks up at her and her hollow eyes seem to get hollower.
Yes. Follow me.
They crest the next hill, revealing a grand Victorian Gothic mansion that appears to have fallen into disrepair over the last, century and a half. But it looks like it was once magnificent, with a wraparound porch, intricate woodwork around its frame, and a grand tower in the center overlooking the resort. What is this place? They jump at the sound of mechanical noise from behind them. They turn to see the ski lift starting again. Someone's heading up in their direction.
Come on.
As they approach, Beth begins to notice that there's something off about the mansion. The windows are lower to the ground than usual. The steps leading up to the porch are numerous and short. As they climb them, she notices there are 2 sets of doorknobs on the front door, one set in the middle and one low to the ground. She whispers, "The Tom Thumb house." They enter, and Beth has a moment of vertigo. Everything in the house is built to the scale of Tom Thumb's 3-foot frame, making Beth appear like a giant. But these aren't pieces of toy furniture. Everything is as exquisitely designed as the house itself, custom made from the finest materials. And this is, by the way, based in fact. Tom Thumb, wealthy enough, he had a few houses that were all built to scale of him and his wife Lavinia. There's one in Massachusetts, I believe, where the house is still there, but I think all the furniture's gone. Anyway, the interior has been well preserved, with plaques in every room for tourists to read up on Tom and Lavinia's history on the resort. Beth walks up to a portrait of them that hangs on the wall, a photo from their wedding. This place is incredible. Cassie leans on a support pillar, refusing to sit in the chairs made for her frame, trying not to look at anything.
It's a sick monument to people who built their entire identities around other people's disrespect. They turned themselves into creatures to be gawked at, like little insects pinned in a shadow box.
Yeah, but what else were they supposed to do? Look at the life it bought them. Back then, did they really have a choice?
No, but I do.
Beth looks at her friend and kneels down to embrace her. I'm so grateful you chose me to be part of your family, Cass.
You're all I need, babe, and we're going to get out of this together. Now, come on.
Cassie leads Beth through the shadowy house, passing through a rec room with a tiny billiards table and a miniature grand piano, then Lavinia's parlor room with a tiny sewing machine and standard-sized Victrola on a low table. Beth has to duck under the low archways and steps carefully on the stairs to the second floor because they're not quite deep enough to fit her entire foot. They work their way up to the main tower.
This was their bedroom. There's a secret passageway inside that leads up to the attic. We can hide there until my dad gets here.
Beth nods. She looks sick.
Hey, you okay?
Yeah. No. I mean, I will be. I just can't shake the image of Salamandra and her charred corpse.
Charred?
Before she finishes her sentence, the door is kicked open from the inside, smacking Cassie in the mouth and sending her tumbling backwards. A masked attacker ducks under the doorway and looms large in the low hallway. In her fist, she grips a 2-foot-long, splintered piece of the door frame, which is coated in some kind of liquid and dripping onto the floor. Beth yells for her friend and goes to help her up, but the attacker grabs her by her hair and yanks her back. He pulls her hair down roughly so her face is toward the ceiling, then plunges the splintered wood into her mouth and down her throat. He pushes it slowly further, down and down, Beth choking and gurgling around it. Then he gives it a rough twist, and Beth staggers back, her head pinned back by the skewer in her mouth. The attacker swipes a match against his leather mask and touches the flame to the wood, and it goes up in flames instantly, burning Beth from the inside out.
Ooh, that is a nasty kill, Dalton.
Said I was going to get mean.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done a lot of them. Considering this is the 10th original tale that we've done in our monster movie universe, we haven't had a lot of truly gnarly kills.
Well, I was thinking about the Fear Street Part 1 and also Freaky, the Blumhouse movie, and a lot of these modern slashers that do have really creative, nasty kills. And I was like, I got to get at least one in there that's like just fucked up.
This is what I can imagine, the slasher fans would walk out of there saying, like, remember that crazy kill where with the plank of wood?
R.I.P. Beth, Anya from Buffy. Cass scrambles to her feet and runs down the stairs. The attacker pursues, but isn't prepared for the miniature steps and trips and falls past Cassie, crashing into the wall at the bottom. She runs into the kitchen and grabs a knife, then heads back to where the attacker collapsed. He's gone. There's a tense sequence of her stalking around the dark first floor, knife in hand, breathing shakily. Slasher movie stuff. She turns into the rec room and the attacker leaps at her, but she's able to sidestep, sending him crashing face first into the low door frame. She realizes this is her domain. The attacker turns and kicks her, knocking the knife from her hand and sending it skittering across the room. He chases her through the rec room, and Cassie turns over furniture to block his path. The obstacles are big enough to trip on, but not quite big enough to easily swipe aside. She dumps the billiard table on its side, and the attacker steps on the balls and pratfalls onto his back. Very Ghostface move.
Yeah, I do think it's cool whenever the slasher in a slasher movie can eat shit all the time and still be menacing.
While he struggles to get up, she overturns the piano with an enormous clatter. The cover pops open, revealing the strings inside, which are loose after a century of not being tuned or used. She gets an idea and quickly unwinds a wire from their pegs inside. The attacker climbs groggily to his feet, just as Cassie climbs her way up his back and wraps the piano wire around his neck and squeezes tightly. He chokes and gasps as she grits her teeth and screams, but eventually he's able to get his hands on her and flips her over his shoulders, sending her crashing to the ground. Cassie lies dazed and in pain. The attacker unwraps the wire from his throat and gasps for air, then goes searching for the knife that she dropped. He finds it against a wall covered in windows that are as black as the night outside. He bends down and picks up the knife, then stands, peering at his own masked reflection in the window. He tilts his head like maybe he sees something out there. Then lightning flashes, revealing Victor Frankenstein standing on the other side of the glass, face to face with the attacker and looking super pissed off. He crashes his arms through the glass and grabs the attacker by the neck, stepping into the room. They wrestle in the small room, looking like giants, tripping over the furniture, the billiard balls, crashing into the door frames. Cassie takes the opportunity and crawls for the knife, avoiding the footfalls of the giants above. She grabs it and darts into the fray, stabbing the attacker in the calf and then fleeing, then coming in again and slashing his Achilles tendon. The attacker screams and whips around, grabbing the knife from her hand and kicking her square in the face. Victor roars with rage and grabs him by both sides of his head, but before he can pull him back, the attacker swings the knife over his head and stabs Victor in the forehead, burying the knife up to the hilt. Victor goes limp. A thick, gooey drop of bloody pus drips from the knife, and he falls onto his back, motionless. The attacker stumbles to his knees. He crawls towards Cassie slowly until he's on top of her, then wraps his hands around her neck and squeezes. She struggles against him, but is powerless.
Victor, please get up!
In the frame, we see Cassie and the attacker in the foreground, and Victor's body lying still and lifeless in the background with the knife in his forehead, out of focus. Cassie flails, getting weaker, choking out his name as she passes out. And then, still out of focus in the background, Victor slowly sits up and turns his head dramatically towards the attacker. He slides the knife out of his forehead and stands over him. But the attacker sees Cassie's eyes flick over his shoulder, and he dives out of the way at the last second, Victor's knife missing him. The attacker stumbles to the window and flops out of it into the night. Victor helps Cassie to her feet. "Are you okay?"
No, I'm not.
They sit together against the wall, and Cassie pants heavily with tears in her eyes, eventually working up into a panic attack, sobbing over her dead mom, her dead friend, not so much Salamandra, and the ordeal that she just went through. Victor tentatively puts his arm around her, and she leans her head against his massive chest. When she starts to calm down, Victor speaks. "What is your name?"
Cassandra Falk. Cassie.
"Hello, Cassie. Do you know who these men are that are trying to kill you?"
No, I have no idea. Why would anyone want to hurt my mom or Beth or...
"What is it?"
Beth. Before she died, she thought maybe it was Luke and Henry, my fiancé and his best man. We're here for my wedding.
Tears well up again at this word. "Please, Cassie, I need you to tell me everything." She does. She tells him about her family, the circus, fleeing to America, missing her sister Elsa's funeral, the wedding, the awkward dinner with Salamandra, the attacks. "And do you think Lucas and Henry are capable of such violence?"
No, never.
"And you know these men well?"
Of course. I mean,
"Yes."
well, Luke and I have only been together for like 10 months. He proposed after 7. Beth always thought that was too fast. Said there was no way to really know a person that fast.
"But what?"
But I thought if I didn't say yes now, nobody would ever have me.
Victor understands this. Maybe better than anyone. Cassie tries to erase the silence.
Wait, it's your turn. What? I mean, who are you? Why are you able to get your brain skewered and then do the Undertaker thing?
"I am Victor Frankenstein. I was born 250 years ago, right here in these mountains. I was a scientist. I had a wife and a son and a beautiful daughter. But unlike you, she wanted to stay in the family business, very badly, and I wouldn't let her. In the end, I sent her away, banished her from the family. Then I died. And when I woke up, I had no memories of that life. I was covered with these scars and sores, and my body is in constant agony. But I cannot die. Death was taken from me by my own daughter, she who returned me to life. I was confused, I was lonely, I was full of rage, and I took it out on everyone who crossed my path. Until my daughter inadvertently returned my memories to me, a gift for which I thanked her by trying to end her life. But I didn't. To punish myself for my sins, I entered an isolation that I intended to never leave. Eventually I was found, and once again swayed to pursue evil deeds, until one person decided to make me her friend, the first friend of my new life. I realized then that self-flagellation was not enough. I must try to atone for my past wrongs by doing as much good as I can.
Like saving my life.
I was here for another purpose. Then I saw a masked man stalking around the estate. As someone who has done my fair share of stalking, I assumed nefarious intentions. I was correct.
Thank you, Victor.
She stands up. Where are you going?
To say goodbye to my friend.
Are you sure you want to see that? It is a dangerous thing to taint the memory of a loved one.
I'm sure.
They walk back upstairs, but when they get to the bedroom, Beth's body is gone. Cassie fights back tears.
God damn it.
I am sorry I could not save her, Cassie.
Yeah, me too.
There's a sudden noise from a room beneath them. Someone else is in the house. Cassie looks up at Victor, hatred on her face. She's ready to go final girl mode.
Let's go kill some motherfuckers.
Before they can go down, though, a loud pounding at the front door makes them freeze. Then, a voice.
Cassie? Cass, baby, you in there?
Dad?
Victor and Cassie move cautiously down to the front door, and Cassie goes to open it. Victor puts his hand on her shoulder and gives a look that says, "Are you sure?" She nods and swings it open, revealing Pretorius, looking frozen solid and thoroughly exhausted from his climb back up the mountain. "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat, baby girl. I'm so glad you're okay." God, that's rough on my voice.
I was curious. You wanted to be the Tom Waits and the narration?
Yeah, that was a mistake. She motions for him to quiet down, but then he sees Victor and fumbles for his gun again. I'm going to brush past, the comical moment where Cassie has to convince him that Victor is the good guy and is trying to protect them from the crazy people in the masks. They tell him that at least one of them is in the house right now. They creep through the dark house, Victor in the lead. Pretorius marvels at the mess in the rec room. Then they spot a trail of blood leading from the broken window into the kitchen to the door to the grand dining hall. Victor throws it open, revealing
Luke?
Cassie! Luke stands on the opposite side of the dining table. He's leaning over to reach to the center of the table, and in his fist he holds a blackened skewer of wood, Beth's head still impaled on its tip, her mouth, nose, and chin charred beyond recognition, while her eyes remain open and staring at the ceiling. He holds the skewer above a glass vase. It is not clear if he's putting it in the vase or taking it out.
What are you doing here?
Babe, we have to go. There's some maniac on the loose.
Luke, what are you doing?
He looks at the head in his hand and drops it in horror, sending it rolling so it's staring at Cassie. Oh, I came here looking for you. But then I found this, and it was so disfigured, I couldn't tell if it was yours or Beth's, so I had to, check. He attacked me and Henry back at Henry's place. So we came back to the lodge for you, but no one was there. And then he found us, and I ran here, and he's babbling, clearly in a panic. Come on, baby. We got to get away from those freaks. Let's go.
Excuse me?
We have to go now. He walks out from behind the low table, revealing fresh blood around his right calf and ankle. Everyone sees it. Cassie is getting increasingly distressed.
Baby, what happened to your leg?
He looks down as if just noticing. My leg? Oh, someone broke the window. That's how I got in. And the glass. Cass, none of this matters. That man behind you is a killer and we have to leave. Cassie averts her eyes and says,
Victor.
Victor steps forward and grabs Luke by the shoulders, slamming him down on the table. He wraps one enormous hand around his neck. What's going on? Let go of me, you ugly asshole!
Luke, we just need to make sure.
Make sure of what? What? You think I'm the maniac? I'm the only normal one here. You're the circus freaks. All of you. I should have never come up here, and I never would have agreed to marry you if I knew about your disgusting, backwards, crazy family. Hey, what are you doing? Victor starts rifling through Luke's coat with his free hand. He pauses and pulls out a Brigella mask with a black veil at the bottom. He shows it to Cassie, who starts to cry. Wait, no, I found it on the table in here, next to the head. I put it in my pocket, so I grabbed the steak. It's not mine.
How could you? How could you do all this? I loved you. I trusted you.
Luke looks shocked at this accusation. Then his face darkens. So that's how it is. Fucking keep your love. What a ridiculous idea that I could ever love someone like you. That anyone could. Like it or not, Cass, this is where you belong. Back at the freak show with Daddy. I'm just glad I found out before I actually got chained for life to a tap dancing His breath cuts off. Victor is squeezing his neck, tight enough to turn Luke's face purple. He chokes out. Cass! Stop him, Cass! I can't breathe! Cass, I can't! But she does nothing to stop Victor. She just looks down and silently weeps until he speaks no more. After a long moment of silence, Pretorius puts his hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, Church Mouse. But Henry's still running amok out there somewhere, so we gotta go.
Yeah, I know.
Now come on. I got Salamandra waiting in the car outside. Not enough room for the big fella, though. Sorry, friend. Appreciate the help, but this is where we part ways. Cassie looks up, confused.
Wait, Salamandra?
Oh, yes. I mean her body. I recovered it so we can give her a proper burial. It's in the car.
I thought you'd climb back up the mountain.
I keep an extra car here. Cassie backs up towards Victor, a realization dawning on her face. She turns to face him.
Beth said she found Sally's charred body.
Victor just nods, unsure what she's trying to say.
Salamandra, the human salamander, the incombustible woman, her skin. She's coated in a fire-resistant oil. It's part of her act. She faked her death.
Why would she do that? Pretorius responds. Because you're not one of us, church mouse. Even if your late fiancé seemed to think so. It's a shame it had to come to this. It all could have been avoided if you'd just been more like your sister. From out of the shadows, an enormous masked figure, taller than Victor, at least 7.5 feet, emerges and places Victor in a tight hold, immobilizing him. You can drop the mask, baby. Seems that part's over with. The figure removes their mask, revealing
Elsa?
Elsa Falk, Cassie's supposedly dead sister, played by Gwendolyn Christie. Who technically we did use.
We did, but not in our universe.
It's not in our universe.
She's
in League of
League
Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, she's 20th Century Studios has butchered for at least one film.
Yes, she is also our Elsa Falk. Victor says, you neglected to mention that your dead sister was a giant.
She was dead. I didn't think it was relevant.
Not dead yet. Pretorius looks up at Elsa with sorrow on his face. Doc gave her 6 months. We've always known that people with her condition don't live long, but that don't make it easier. We were going to tell you, but then you called and told us you were getting married. His face darkens with disgust. To a towner. And suddenly it hit us like a hammer. As soon as poor Elsa was gone, all of this would be left to you. He advances on Cassie, backing her up as Victor continues to struggle against the silent giant's grasp. You who abandoned us, who judged us, who treated us the same as the worst of the drunken rubes who pay their nickels just to spit on our kind. It would be left to you and that hateful little jaboni lying dead on the great general's table.
So Luke didn't... He wasn't...
Don't feel too bad, Cass. If the brute didn't kill him, I was about to do it myself.
And Mom?
Pretorius flies into a rage. You mean my precious Lillian? My partner in crime since we were 20 years old? How dare you call her mother after the way you treated her? She wasn't supposed to know about any of this. She was just gonna drink her wine, seasoned with just a touch of poison from Salamandra's stash, and retreat to her bedroom, missing all this bloodshed. But that loudmouth pig fucker drank it instead. Your mother's death belongs solely to you and that monster you brought into our home. And he's a nastier bit of work than anyone in the Falcon show, I'll tell you that. Pretorius turns and looks at Victor, dropping the rage for a moment. And if you're looking for work, we do have a few openings. Victor lunges forward against Elsa's grip, roaring. All right, have it your way. Elsa, Sally, let's get this show on the road. Salamandra limps into the room, blood trailing from her injured leg. She was the one that killed Beth. She marches, hence the fire.
Right.
She marches towards Cassie, a long wooden stake in one hand, dripping lighter fluid. In the other hand, she holds her lighter. Meanwhile, Elsa produces a long, serrated knife and holds it to Victor's neck. Sally towers over Cassie and holds the lighter close to the tip of the stake. Just before she lights it, a shot rings out, and the lighter flies out of her hand. Everyone turns at once to see Henry, doubled over, holding his stomach with one hand and a gun with the other.
Who's a pig fucker?
Pretorius whirls and raises his own gun, and they both shoot each other simultaneously and fall. Chaos ensues. Cassie stabs Sally with the knife and dives for the lighter. Meanwhile, Elsa starts sawing through Victor's neck, trying to cut his head clean off, unleashing a sticky waterfall of bloody pus. Sally and Cassie wrestle on the ground for the stake and the lighter. Cassie manages to get the stake and lights it. But while her hands are off of Sally, Sally grabs the knife out of her leg and stabs it into Cassie's shoulder. Cassie doesn't relent, though, and holds the flaming stake over Sally's eye, while Sally tries to keep her at bay by pushing upwards with the knife. We focus on the stake and see a single drop of lighter fluid gather at its tip. It grows and grows until it drips down, straight into Sally's eye. She blinks, and Cassie blows the flames down towards Sally's face. Her eye erupts in fire and she screams, letting go of the knife.
Guess you're not all fireproof, bitch.
Cassie plunges the flaming stake into Sally's eye, and Sally goes limp.
Another really good kill, Dalton.
Next, she rushes towards Elsa, holding both the knife and the flaming stake. Elsa throws Victor to the ground and charges back, raising her foot and planting it right in Cassie's shoulder, knocking her back and pinning her to the ground by her knife wound. She screams in pain, but then Henry is on his feet and charging at Elsa. Elsa grabs him easily by the chest with both hands and raises him high above her head. She starts to squeeze both sides of his ribcage until finally there's an explosion of snaps as it crumbles under her grip, puncturing his lungs and deflating his chest with a heavy gasp of air out of his mouth. He falls limp to the ground. Victor takes the opportunity to grab Elsa by the waist, lifting her up and powerbombing her through the Tom Thumb dining table. Elsa is finally knocked out, but not dead. Pretorius gets shakily to his feet. He grabs the flaming stake from beside Cassie and rushes Victor, and the surprise of it sends Victor falling to the ground with Pretorius on top of him. Pretorius stabs him over and over and over again in the chest, at least a dozen times, shrieking like a crazed monkey. "Why won't you die?" Through gritted teeth, Victor says, "I did. 200 years ago." He rises easily to his feet, picking up Pretorius by his neck and then throwing him down on top of Sally's body. He picks up the flaming stake and drives it through Pretorius' chest, through Sally's underneath and into the floor, pinning them together. Their bodies erupt in flames. Cassie's POV. She's starting to pass out, her vision going gray. The last thing she sees is her father flailing against the stake, fire consuming his body. When she opens her eyes next, she's back outside in the blizzard. She's draped in Victor's arms, just like Caroline was at the end of our Frankenstein movie. His head is still half sawed off. He's carried her up to the top of the mountain. She blinks her eyes blearily and mutters,
"Where are we?"
Victor stops and looks up. Home. The camera turns to reveal an enormous charred castle rising above them at the top of the mountain. The crumbling remains of Castle Frankenstein. End of Act 2.
Wow, we've still got more to go.
So we do have more to go, but like I said, my Act 3 is very short because I do feel like that showdown is really part of Act 3. It's the reveal of the killer.
That feels like the climax to me.
It's a big bloodbath, but the thing is...
Let's recap, though, where all the characters are, because I feel like
a lot happened.
I think everyone... Who's not dead at this point?
At this point, the only people living are Cassie, Victor, and Elsa.
Okay, right, because Elsa's knocked out. She's not dead.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we have Gwendolyn Christie, and this is a wordless role for her? Does she speak?
She has not spoken yet.
Okay, so the reveal, Pretorius was never completely off the suspect list because we see him kill one person by accident.
Well,
right?
and that is purely by accident.
Yeah, it's purely by accident.
That was him that crashed through and kills Salamandra because he had left, right? He left to look for Cassie.
Okay, so we're told there are 2 killers. It turns out there are actually 3.
Sally gets added after she fakes her death. Yes.
Right, gotcha. Okay, that all scans. Henry's heel turn happens kind of fast for me. And I understand it's part of a sort of mislead.
You mean Luke, the fiancé?
Sorry, yes, Luke's heel turn happens a little fast for me. And I understand that's kind of part of a mislead.
Well,
about him being a killer. He's out of our story for a while. In the beginning, we see him seemingly like he's a good guy. And I don't feel like we get any sort of hints at his prejudice or stuff that much before he lets it all go.
Part of that is,
again, these are sketches of movies. It's kind of hard to make room for all of these beats, but he's just out of the literal picture for a while.
That's kind of the thing. I realized during Act 2 that, in order to make just the plot of this one work, there was going to have to be so many beats I needed to hit that, in the final version, I would want kind of more of everything. I would want more of Cassie and Victor fighting side by side. I would want more development of their relationship. I would like more circus stuff.
Sure,
I would
and that's
more,
kind of the nature of our show.
And
right?
I would like, probably in the dinner scene, the first hints that maybe Luke isn't the guy that Cassie thinks that he is, that Beth is concerned for her, and yeah, that in further drafts would get more fleshed out so that he's not a good person, that maybe he's even somewhat of an abusive partner, that is very good at hiding it, but as, Cassie sort of says, she's so convinced in her mind based on her upbringing that no one would ever have her that, she has gone along with it and rushed into this wedding.
Sure. No, I buy that. It is, again, it's touchy. It's the kind of thing where I know it's not it's not my business to depict to police the representation here because I don't have the authority to do so. And it's just sort of the weird guilt that comes with privilege where I feel like I'm supposed to object to something, but I don't actually know if there's anybody who's a little person or a giant or has experienced any of this kind of stuff for themselves who wants to reach out to us on the show and tell us, like what their feelings are about it. That obviously would be very welcome.
Yeah, if I've fucked up, I am open to hearing it. I have tried to be, as delicate as possible and treat these characters with humanity. But if I messed up, let me know. And if you have ways to better represent these characters in the future, let me know.
Right.
So plot-wise, just to spell it out for the listeners so you don't have to listen again, I think the sort of killer choreography is that at the beginning, the person we see at the very top of the film, at the top of the mountain, is Elsa, giant in her coat and everything. And that is who strangles Cassie in the van. Then she flees and heads down to attack Luke and Henry. And that does actually happen, as Luke says. Meanwhile, Pretorius leaves and comes and kills Salamandra. Salamandra then, after faking her death, heads to the Tom Thumb house, while everyone else heads down the mountain. Meanwhile, after our heroes get to the Tom Thumb house, Elsa takes the lift up, which is why they see the lift moving.
Right. By the way, I love the use of the lift as like a sort of ominous way where you don't even have to see the bad guy coming to know that they're coming.
Yeah.
Creates an instant escalation of tension. I love the use of that here.
Yeah. The reason why I split Act 3 kind of like this is because I'm really telling two overlapping stories here. It is The Bride and Frankenstein.
Right.
So far, it has been the Bride's movie. Act 1 is all Bride and no Frankenstein. Act 2 is both of them together.
And now we kind of complete the handoff here and it becomes Victor's movie.
Yes. Now the plot threads of Cassie's story are resolved, but the killer is still on the loose, or at least one of them. And now we're at Victor's home.
Right.
And so we will sort
unpack
of
some of
tie
his
up
baggage,
why he's in this movie, besides just it's fun to put in
sure.
here. And doing the Michael Myers sit up, and doing, like, I tried to do as many like Halloween slasher tropes as possible with Victor in the reversed role, and there's another one coming up that I like too.
I always think like when we live in this sort of established IP soaked landscape where you can't get anything made outside of horror, ironically, you can't get anything made that's not a pre-sold product. I always feel like there's it's like a responsibility for the creatives who are in those positions being like, okay, if I'm going to get to make any movie, it's going to be a Star Wars, right? To be like, okay, what are you going to give people that they don't expect so that you don't waste this opportunity to tell a story? That's like a benchmark that I think of a lot when it's like, all right, that's an opportunity. What are you going to do with it? If you don't do anything with that opportunity, like the Super Mario Brothers movie is, they don't do anything with the opportunity of you have a blank check from a studio to make a movie that everyone's going to see because it's called Super Mario Brothers. They just made Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
You have the blank check from Universal here. Be like, you are making a movie about Frankenstein. It's part of this franchise. People are invested in it. People are going to go, what do you want to do with it? And you chose to do something new, and I like that.
I appreciate that. Pretorius heads, look, he's not a gay mad scientist, but I gave you fucking Tom Waits as an aging circus man killer who gets to be the ultimate mastermind. I feel like that's pretty satisfying.
By itself,
right?
I find that to be entertaining. I also, just so you know, in my mind, he is wearing a bowler hat.
Of course he is. He looks like Tom Waits.
He looks like Tom Waits off the cover of Mule Variations or something.
We don't even need a costume person to work on him. He just shows up.
I'm pretty sure, and he played the devil in the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. He just wore his
Tom
own
Waits
shit.
Clothes, yeah.
Because then he appeared on his next album cover in that exact costume.
I'm so glad that he's dead and I don't have to do his voice anymore.
I'm so glad. The thing is, I would love to do Tom Waits' voice on the show, and it would be a mistake because I would go too hard. Anyway, he's dead now, but Gwendolyn Christie. Is Gwendolyn Christie a giant in real life?
No,
she's
just
tall lady. Okay.
We're going to put her on, some kind of stilts or something.
Okay, I was just curious about like if there was a thing I didn't know about.
She's just a tall, imposing woman, and she's playing 7.5 feet here.
And I buy it.
Yeah.
And you can't teach that.
R.I.P. All right, let's finish this up and we can talk about it in totality. Act 3. Cassie and Victor approach the castle. Cassie is well enough to walk now, and Victor slows his pace to match hers without saying anything. Victor stops and reads a plaque in front of the entrance. Photo spot number 4. Take a pic in front of the spooky remains of Castle Frankenstein. They open the creaky front door, and Victor soaks in the memories. The foyer is dark, the walls all fire-damaged and black. Any remaining furniture is burnt down to nubs. But once upon a time, it was his home. What does the world know of this place? Cassie looks at the castle with new eyes. She's been in it countless times as a child, but it never occurred to her that real flesh and blood people used to live in it. It was just a scary playground.
Not much. World-renowned scientist lived here with his wife until disaster struck, and they died. Then when their son came back to lay them to rest, he was killed by an intruder. While later, the whole castle burned down in some sort of accident involving their daughter. It killed her assistant, I think.
And the daughter? She lived?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how long. If I remember right, she settled in Geneva, had a family.
Victor gives a small smile.
Based on what you told me, I'd say we never really heard the real story.
The real story is even more tragic. More than this world could ever understand.
I think I could understand.
I am sorry about your family. There is no hell worse than the loss of everyone you love. It's why I have learned to live alone. It is easier than the loss. He pulls away from her. Your sister will be coming here soon. I am sure of it. Tell me about her.
Well, she was adopted too. Different parents, if you didn't figure that one out already. We never got along. She was quiet, a total daddy's girl. I was the rebel, always trying to stray as far away from the circus grounds as possible. We saw the world from different heights, although ironically, she was the one closer to the ground. We had an act together, Jill the Giant Slayer. I'd dress up as some ancient warrior. We'd do a whole stage struggle. Eventually, I'd triumph with my slingshot and sword. I hated every second of it, but it was Elsa's whole world. Always wanting to rehearse again and again, trying to make it perfect. When I left, she was devastated. Not because she was losing me, but because she was losing the act.
Victor has walked over to a rack on the wall, upon which still hangs a number of swords, also blackened by fire. He yanks off the smallest one and tosses it to Cassie. I am afraid the time has come to reprise your role. For most, it would be a single-handed sword, but Cassie wields it in both fists. Victor says they should climb to the top of the tower and fortify themselves there. They climb the crumbling stairs, and Victor stops on the first landing. Wait. There is something I must do first. Cassie follows him down a dark hall to an empty, open room, the rear wall covered in broken windows. It's Caroline's old room, which we saw in the cold open of the film. Victor walks to the center of the room and falls to his knees. Cassie runs to his side, but he's not hurt. He's just clawing at a loose stone in the floor. He wrenches it free and unveils a wooden box, long buried underneath the floor. Cassie watches him open it and rifle through its contents. Diary pages, ancient animal bones, shining gems found during unknown adventures. And then he finds what he's looking for. He pulls out an intricate wood carving of a wolf, howling at the moon.
What is it?
This is what I returned here for.
Your daughters?
Once. Now it is a gift for a friend who helped me when I needed it most, and deserved it least. He looks down at the carving in his hands, and a tear falls from his eye. Cassie says she'll give him a moment alone, and steps into the hallway. Victor weeps silently over the carving before a sound draws his attention upwards. A raven has fluttered to the windowsill, ruffling its wings and seeming to look right at Victor. He climbs gently to his feet and approaches it slowly. To his surprise, it doesn't fly away as he reaches out to it. He picks it up in his hands and realizes why. There's a nail puncturing one of its wings. He lifts it up with wonder and slowly pulls the nail out. The raven flaps its wings and flies into the blizzard. Victor leans out the window to watch it disappear. Then, a thunk. Victor reaches to his neck and finds a nail buried in the side of it. Another thunk, and a second nail is buried in his cheek. He looks down to see Elsa, standing on the ground beneath the castle, rage on her face and a nail gun in her hand. Victor pockets the wolf and runs to Cassie. She's here. They hurry up and up the winding stone staircase until they finally reach the lab on the top floor. The roof is half gone, leaving it open and exposed to the elements. The enormous lightning rod still sticks high into the air, although at an angle. Most of the machinery it was connected to is gone. When lightning strikes the rod, we see the energy wind down to a loose grounding cable that's not connected to anything. It just sparks and flails and fizzles out. Do not touch that. Cassie marvels.
This is where you were born? Reborn, I mean.
Victor nods. I will handle your sister. Look around for a place to hide. In the center of the room, the enormous stone slab upon which both Victor and his bride were born lies broken on the ground in a pile of large pieces. Cassie heads towards this and starts to pull away some of the chunks and suddenly lets out a yelp. What is it? He comes over and sees what she's uncovered. The bones of a hand and forearm, aged and cracked. There's only one person whose hand that could be. Victor kneels and traces his fingers along its ivory until they're stopped by something hanging loosely on one of its fingers. It's a silver wedding band. He slips it off her finger and holds it in front of his face, remembering.
Who was this?
Elizabeth, my bride. His reverie is cut short when the door bangs open, revealing an enraged Elsa, swinging her nail gun to point at Victor. He pockets the ring and stands, yelling, "Run! Go!" Elsa charges forward, discharging the nail gun as fast as it can handle. Victor is pelted with dozens of nails, puncturing him all over his body, arms, face, and neck until the nail gun is fully discharged. But he's still standing. She hits him at a run, and he staggers back against the crumbled remnants of a wall, his body hanging out over the edge of the castle. They struggle, but Elsa is terrifyingly strong and breaks his wrist when he tries to grab at her face. As Victor howls in pain, Elsa pushes him over the wall. Cassie screams for him as he tumbles out into the open air, falling and falling until he thumps to the ground below. Elsa looks over the edge at Victor's broken, nail-ridden body until she sees the pool of red-white fluid spreading around his head in a puddle. She pulls away and leans against the wall, breathing heavily, the hard part over. Eventually she gathers herself and stands, then takes another look over the side. Victor Frankenstein is gone. Elsa roars and turns to the door. Standing in her way is Cassie, brandishing her sword.
Please, Elsa, why are you doing this? Dad's gone. There's no reason to fight anymore. We're sisters, damn it!
For the first time, Elsa speaks. You never treated me like a sister then. Why would I start now? This is it. Our big David and Goliath showdown. Cassie wields her sword against her sister, who is literally 2.5 times her height. Most of this would be choreographed on the set, but the idea, of course, is that Cassie is quicker and harder to catch, and spends her time darting around Elsa and taking shots when she can. She slashes at Elsa's legs, keeping her off balance, trips her with rubble. The audience cheers as Cassie is able to get the upper hand on her very big sister. But it doesn't last. Elsa knocks Cassie back into the broken slab, and her head cracks against it, bleeding. Elsa grabs the sword and holds it high over her head, but before she brings it down, Victor tackles her from the side. They struggle again, and Elsa ends up on top, driving the sword into the already open gash in his throat. Time to finish what she started. She saws deeper and deeper into his neck, trying to decapitate him. But then Cassie drops a chunk of stone on her back and she falls, then rises to take care of Cassie once and for all. Victor looks up and sees lightning flashing in the clouds above them. He gets up and hurries to the loose grounding wire. He fiddles with something and then yells, "To me, Cassie!" Cassie darts between Elsa's legs towards Victor. Elsa turns and finds herself face to face with Frankenstein. He grabs her wrist and pulls out the wedding ring, which he has wrapped the grounding cable around. He slips it on her finger and pushes her backwards, just as lightning strikes the rod, energy sparking its way down the line and into her hand, electrocuting her so badly that seams of her flesh instantly burn and tear open. She seizes up and falls backwards onto the remains of the stone slab, her eyes wide open and frozen. From her POV, we see Cassie standing tall over her, just before she drives the sword deep into her chest, pinning her to the slab. Elsa tries to speak, but her muscles are frozen. After a moment, they all go limp, and she dies on the slab. Victor slides his wife's ring off of her finger and puts it in his pocket with the wolf carving. Are you okay?
I think so. You?
We look at Victor. His head is half sawn off, his wrist is broken, he's covered with stab wounds, bullet holes, and nails. I've been worse. Cassie slips her hand into Victor's, and they descend the steps. Later, they're back at the lodge. The weather has cleared up. It's morning. They stand looking at Cassie's van and its mural showcasing the trapeze artist, her mother, the lizard woman, Salamandra, the giant, Elsa, and her, Cassie, sitting on Elsa's shoulder. They're both silent, neither of them really sure how to say goodbye after a night like that.
Good deed accomplished. I hope this helps erase a little bit of that guilt you're carrying around.
I was happy to help, though it will take a lot more than this to tip the scales in my favor. Cassie looks up at him, struggling with what she wants to say next.
Hey, look. I know that at this point you're used to being alone, but I'm not. I just lost my family, my best friend, and my fiance, so I don't know what your plans are now, but I could really use some company, I think, if you're willing.
Victor gives a gentle smile. It would be my pleasure. He holds his hand out and she grabs it. The camera zooms out from them to see the mountain in its entirety, Castle Frankenstein looming tall over all of it. Credits. Mid-credits scene.
We always leave that little gap as if we're going to pretend the movie's over.
Yep. Well, that's
how it's done.
That's how it's done. Mid-credit scene. We open on the same shot we just left, looking at a wide shot of Frankenstein's castle looking decrepit yet majestic in the Swiss Alps. Then this image slides off screen, replaced by an image of a happy couple on a ski lift. We zoom out to see that we're looking at a computer screen, a travel site describing the amenities of the Falk ski resort. Carol Lemley, played by Darcy Carden, copies the URL and pastes it into a document titled Honeymoon Options. Her fiancé, Dr. Jennifer Halsey, played by Annabelle Wallace, enters holding a stack of mail and a wrapped bouquet of flowers. She plops them down on the table next to Carol. Oh, these are lovely. She takes a look at the tag while Jenny filters through the envelopes. Wait, who's Gabby Utterson? But Jenny isn't listening. She's looking at one of the cards curiously.
We've got an invitation back from Victor.
Ooh, is he coming? Jenny looks up at Carol with a shocked smile.
He's asking for a +1.
Carol pumps her fists. Yes! Go Vic! Post-credits scene. Once again back at Castle Frankenstein. This time, another blizzard rages at the snowy peak. In the open air of the lab, Elsa's body lies prone, the sword still sticking out of her chest. Lightning strikes the sword repeatedly, making her body twitch and spasm. Large swaths of it are now burnt, her skin split open in long seams. Her hair has fried and sticks straight out, splayed around her head. A thick streak of it has turned white. An enormous bolt, the largest yet, crackles across the screen and illuminates her body. A moment of silence, and then her eyes pop open. The end.
Fucking of course they do. I need a second.
The Bride and Frankenstein.
The Bride and Frankenstein. So you have kind of established a new Bride of Frankenstein type figure.
Let's not forget that the Bride of Frankenstein was never the monster's bride.
Right.
She was born and rejected him.
Right. So this is, yes. So you've now created a new undead Frankenstein-esque creature.
That he did put a ring on.
He did technically put a ring on it. I thought that was where I figured we were going from that point on. And that's clever.
But also,
that she kind of is in a weird symbolic way, the Bride of Frankenstein.
But also, I did want to set up Cassie and Victor as a possible future couple.
Yeah.
I would like them to be the future bride and husband of Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
United by their family trauma and fucked up family dynamics and feeling like outsiders.
I'm into it. There is one thing I scribbled down during Act 3, and it's that I think the Elsa stuff happens so fast, and the space of time between introducing their act and the reprise of their act is too short. And I think what I would like to see that might help to give us more understanding of these characters and make the finished version on screen more showy and less telly is I would like to have interspersed amongst this narrative a couple flashbacks to her childhood in the circus. That way we get, and it doesn't have to even give away who the actor is going to be at the end of the movie, because you can have younger people playing Cassie and Elsa in these flashbacks. I think we need to see the David and Goliath act. I know that it's painted on the van, but I think early on, I think we need to see some of that life and then have a good hour of the movie before it comes back around.
Yeah, I also wanted to avoid again, I was trying to do the whodunit as best as possible. And so I wanted to plant the seed of her sister being dead and in the circus, but not have people catch on to, oh, that's who the killer is, that it's going to be this. And that's going to be tough, because if you introduce that her sister was a giant, and we see this giant character that's, with
that
Frankenstein,
is tough.
people are going to immediately be like, oh, it's the sister, And so it's for the purposes of the podcast, my main priority was maintaining the whodunit structure.
Right.
And keeping things surprising. It is a first draft.
Sure. No,
and
that's the thing. And we like to workshop.
Be beefed.
I rarely have substantive notes to give you at all. So I'm sort of flexing a little bit that I have any ideas at all.
I think you're right. I think you're right, though, that Elsa's time is brief. Hopefully a lot of that would be carried by Gwendolyn Christie's performance and be able to see the performance. And of course, as you said, the Luke turn is very sudden, that we would want to see that a lot earlier.
But we have the opening we have her potential of her exploring her guilt for not being there at the...
There can be a lot more talk about the sister and, setting up the dynamic, I guess.
I think even her explaining the bit to... I think maybe there's an opportunity to solve two problems at once by having her kind of explain the bit to Luke at some point during the downtime early in the movie, and have his response to that be kind of telling.
Yeah. Him being sort of disgusted by it and very judgmental, and
maybe making fun of it in a way that's meaner than she's comfortable with, but he thinks he can get away with because she's so down on it.
Yeah, exactly. The sort of overdoing it. And I do want to, while we were talking about sort of the problematic aspects, I think an important part of what I was trying to do with Cassie is that she is not an outsider because she's a little person. She is an outsider because of her family upbringing, that she was brought up in a setting that told her she was a freak, not because she is a freak, but because that's what she was raised to believe. And she ends up on the outside of her family because she rejected that notion. And also the outside of her fiance because that's still her past and it's still part of her.
Sure.
And so she kind of she's not found a place where she belongs. And I wanted her and Victor to relate in that way, where Victor and Cassie are not the same, but neither of them has found a place yet where they feel like another person really understands them, and hopefully they can together not feel like they're on the outside of each other.
The Victor Cassie thing totally works. And I like that we've been spending time paying off existing romances. We've now in this phase, I like that we've established a new one.
Yeah.
And I also really like when Cassie actually goes to the Tom Thumb house now as like an adult who has her own life and her own identity. She's always associated this place with like sort of somebody who she describes it as like a museum to somebody's own sort of oppression.
Yeah.
Right. And ironically, it's a space that was built for it's sort of a space that's more built for her than any place that she's occupied.
Yeah.
Right.
She is allowed to have a place that is built for her.
Yeah. And while she's there, she discovers a little bit of her power.
Yeah.
Right. And I like the way that works without ever putting too fine a point on it. The idea that she has this resentment about her size that is born from how she was raised around it, right?
Yes.
And that she only ever looked at it through that lens. And now she goes back to this place that kind of represents that same idea, but for the person who built it, we kind of get the impression that this was a statement of power. This was someone taking their space and being like, this is a world built for me and I have the power to build it that way.
Yes.
Right. And she goes there and she finds that space and she's like, this is my house. And then she fucking wins the big fight there.
Yeah.
Right. I like that. And I do like that it's not like we don't have to have all speech about it. Right. It's all there. It's all done visually. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I like Cassie as a character. I'm glad she sticks around.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
I want to keep her around.
Yeah, and enjoy when we introduce her to the rest of the gang. I like that we are continuing the thread of using most of these post-credit scenes to basically just build runway towards the big wedding in the Dark Legion 2.
And we're building villains.
Yes.
Because in our first phase, our monsters were sort of the villains in a lot of our movies. And we knew we had Dracula in our back pocket. So we were like, we don't really need to build more big bads because we're leading up to Dracula. And I think here, similar to like the MCU always kills off its best villains and then they can't come back. But I think, you know, the way you did with Phantom, I did with Imhotep, and now we're doing with the Bride of Frankenstein. We're sort of like, let's get some opposing forces on the board that we can bring in whenever we want, you know?
Yeah, and we can fucking goof around with like, all right, maybe Elsa doesn't come back to fight Frankenstein next time. Maybe it's like Elsa versus the fucking Wolfmen for all we know.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
We can do that.
So the Bride of Frankenstein, or the Bride and Frankenstein.
The Bride
rather,
and Frankenstein.
I'm sure not what anyone expected. Maybe our Last Jedi, depending on your attachment to the original Bride of Frankenstein.
Maybe, but like, here's a nice thing about our universe versus the Marvel universe, or to a much greater extent, Star Wars. I really like the balance that we strike between continuing the ongoing narrative of our characters and making these each individual excisable films.
Which I think one of my goals of this was, this one I think is kind of both. It's sort of a standalone film. Like, you know, there's some Frankenstein lore, but it's mostly a standalone slasher. But also it is furthering our dark universe story. And least of all, it's a remake, you know?
Yes. This, I think, in phase 2 so far is the most its own movie, because even the Phantom of the Opera, Black Lagoon is also completely its own movie.
That one's the most because that's the one I'm actually turning into a screenplay.
Yes. But yeah, I don't know. I dig it, but like I said, I outline my kind of philosophy on that sort of thing. And I know that's, we also, when this movie is produced, there will be an entire promotional cycle of people to prepare people for what this movie isn't.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So we have that going for us in the long term after Universal gives us the green light on our entire package of films. And so yeah, slashers are not my thing extremely, right? Like that's another thing where I feel a little bit detached from it. But when you gave me the reference point of You're Next, that really helped me to nail down the tone and begin creating the picture of this movie and how I want to feel about it as we digest it.
It is a playful sort of deconstruction of slasher tropes while maintaining, you know, still trying to be earnestly a good slasher movie.
Yes. And even though, like, despite, you know, my particular sort of bugaboos, I totally can see why Lee Janiak would be a great fit for this. And it wasn't the direction of that movie that made me go, that turned my blood to acid. It was the characterizations. Yeah. And I feel like probably a good way to counterbalance the sort of general joviality of your first act is to have somebody with that mean an eye look at these people and bring out maybe from the actors to find little ways to hint that a lot of them suck in major ways.
Well, and Fear Street definitely has that sort of like cliche Netflix gloss where everything kind of looks the same and bad. But Honeymoon, her first film, is like a gorgeous atmospheric, like in the woods on a lake, like really lush visuals and stuff, you know, that I think would fit the setting really well here.
Right. So when we're putting together the films that inspired by thing, that's the one you want to include on our list.
I would probably list Honeymoon, You're Next. Probably Freaks is the classic horror, you know, lineage most directly. Todd Browning's Freaks, which was he made after Dracula, and actually starred actual freak show performers of the time. I could talk for hours about that, but that's for a bonus podcast, maybe.
A great segue. First, let's just do Picture Lock real quick. So not a whole lot of like universe lore added here. This is very much its own thing, but what do we want to mark down as things you need to take away from this movie before we go on to the next episode? Victor
is a good guy now, and like he is trying to redeem himself for his violent past.
He's walking the earth like Cain.
Yes. He has recovered this wolf statue, which he states is a present for Gwen. It is something he wants to give to her. That's why if that wasn't clear, that's why he stumbles upon this, because he has returned to his home to see if that was still there. He has met someone. Victor has met someone, Cassie Falk, who just lost everybody in her life, and has asked Victor to keep her company. And they are leaving together and attending the wedding together. And we have Elsa Falk, her estranged sister, who has been zapped back to life by lightning in the Frankenstein lab. Motivations unknown. And I think that's it.
All right, that's it. Picture lock. Let's do it.
Lock it in.
Press the button.
It's alive!
That picture is locked in. That is Bride of Frankenstein, our Frankenstein sequel and 11th film of our Dark Universe, 10th original.
All right. And now, as we were just saying, there are things we'd love to discuss that we don't have time to talk about here on the show. To begin with, the mailbag, we're going to have to punt it to next week, to next episode when we have guests on, because those episodes don't run as long. But we have been getting some fun comments about our previous episodes from listeners that we would love to share with you, and we'll talk about that at our next episode. We are getting closer to launching our other patron-exclusive podcast, Are You Afraid of Dylan and Dalton? On our Patreon, patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. That's DYLANANDDALTON. We have been having a great time with our patrons in our Discord.
The Discord community rocks. Shout out to all the patrons on the Discord. You make that fun every day. We love chatting with you guys.
And if you're interested in joining a community of really fun and funny, creative, and inclusive horror fans and fans of this show, please join us there, and you can enjoy some of the benefits. In addition to just hanging out with those folks and us on the Discord, we have been doing watch parties, stream-alongs, where Dalton and I will hang out and screen something on the Discord on the weeks that we don't put out new episodes. So if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, the Saturday that's coming up, there will be an event where we'll be watching something.
We did the original silent Phantom of the Opera. We did other movies we can't list, but we can talk about that one because it's in the public domain.
Yes. And once we hit $200 on that, we will start doing a second monthly show called Are You Afraid of Dylan and Dalton, where we can talk about whatever we want or whatever you want. So if you want to talk about the movie Freaks for an hour and you want to hear, if you, the audience, want to hear Dalton talk about that, that's how you'll get that. If you want to hear Dalton's pitch for a Lost spinoff, which I have heard, which is pretty dope, that's where we'll get that.
If you want us to go see The Pope's Exorcist and finally talk about The Pope's Exorcist, that's how you do it.
If you want to listen to me try to workshop an original audio drama idea with Dalton that will someday hopefully become a show that we do that's like this, but with things that we own, that's what we will do on that show. And at that point, we'll reduce it to monthly watch parties because Dalton needs to sleep sometimes.
The idea is that we want to have content for patrons every week, whether it's a new episode of the podcast, a watch party, or a bonus podcast.
And that's $5 a month for everything. It's one level. We're not going to try to stratify that.
You can pay more if you want, though.
If you want to pay more, we'll appreciate it, but we won't treat you any differently. You get all the same things.
I would love to quit my job so I can do this, but that's a long way away.
That's a long way away. Right now, we are at the point we're covering our hosting expenses and everything. So thank you all so much who are supporting the Patreon.
We're in the black.
And thank you all so much who have been listening to the show, whether you're paying us for it or not. This show is and will always be free because otherwise we'll get sued. So what do we have going ahead for us in 2 weeks? Dylan is actually the person who can answer this question.
Yes, I'm asking you because I know who our guest is, but I don't know what we landed on what we're talking about.
Yes. So we're going to get a guest pitch again. 2 weeks from now, our next guest will be famous poster and video game pundit and short story writer and such, Merritt Kay.
Yes.
And she's going to be pitching a Dark Universe compatible remake of The Black Cat.
Actually, a classic Universal horror film from the time period.
Yeah, based on an Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, this would have been a Carl Laemmle Jr. production.
Wow. So we're gonna hear that pitch, see if it fits in with our existing Dark Universe, just like we did with Merritt is awesome. If you don't know her posts and her video game journalism and stuff, she's great. It's gonna be a really fun time.
Anyway, so we'll see you all then in 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that, there will be my last solo installment of Phase 2, Dracula Lives. I'll give you more details about that in our next episode.
And then it's summer blockbuster season, baby, and we're coming back for the Dark Legion 2. So be prepared for a multi-part
full
event.
Voice cast event. We do one of these a year. We're going to fucking die.
Yes. Luckily, this one's not happening during the holidays this time, but it's going to be really cool. So if you're just joining us, this is the perfect time to jump into the Dark Universe. And remember that above all else,
stay afraid of the Dark Universe.